Chapter 733. Wait a minute. Xiao Wanru turned around in astonishment, only to see a nanny under the shadow of the lamp. There was a table over there, and behind the table sat an old nanny. She seemed to be much older than the previous nanny. She happened to be in the shadow of the lamp, and Xiao Wanru was flustered, so she didn't notice her. Just take off your outer clothes. The old nanny looked up at Xiao Wanru and said gently, "What about the others?" The previous nanny froze for a moment and said at a loss. She had never encountered such a thing. "That's it," the old nanny said. The nanny in front didn't dare to say anything more. It was much easier to take off her outer clothes than to take them off completely. But even so, Xiao Wanru still blushed. The nanny who listened to the examination pressed her hands and legs a few times and asked a few questions. After she finished answering, the nanny recorded the results of the examination and nodded to let her leave. After putting on her outer clothes again, Xiao Wanru retreated outside. She still felt that her face was burning. Fortunately, she only took off her outer clothes. "Fifth miss." A happy voice came from the front. Xiao Wanru looked up and found that she had walked to a flower hall. The young ladies who had been examined were all gathered here. It was Zhang Qilan who spoke. "Miss Zhang." Xiao Wanru calmed herself down and said with a smile. Zhang Qilan also stayed in the Yuhui nunnery for a period of time that day. During that time, the two of them were very close and had a good relationship. Xiao Wanru also appreciated Zhang Qilan's straightforward and lively temperament. "You really came. Great, I was worried that you wouldn't come." Zhang Qilan took Xiao Wanru's hand and said affectionately, while taking her to a pavilion beside the flower hall to talk. There were two young ladies sitting together in the pavilion and chatting in a low voice. Seeing them come over, they nodded to them in a friendly manner. The two of them also smiled at the two young ladies and sat down on the other side of the fence. "I thought you were still observing mourning." Zhang Qilan leaned over and pointed to the flower hall. "There are too many people there. It's better here." Just now, because there were too many people, she deliberately came to the door to wait. "The mourning period for my parents is coming up in 2 days," Xiao Wanru said softly. Although there were still a few days to go, it basically didn't count. After all, learning the rules and etiquette of the palace was not the real consort selection. It was just the first test to get rid of some unsuitable people. Moreover, the Imperial family also knew about it. If they didn't say it, it meant that they approved it. What came next was the key. "That's great. I thought it was boring, but now you're here." "It's great," Zhang Qilan said happily. "Where do you live? I'll come and find you when I'm free, okay?" "Okay, I'm in the last room in the second row over there." Xiao Wanru reached out and pointed in the general direction. Zhang Qilan stood up and asked in the direction of Xiao Wanru's finger. Then she sat down again and nodded with a smile. "Great, I see. You see, we are actually quite close. I'm not far from you. I'm in the first room in that direction. If you have time, you can come and play with me." Zhang Qilan pointed with her right hand. Xiao Wanru looked in the direction and nodded. Zhang Qilan's father was Prime Minister Zhang. Naturally, his daughter couldn't live in the back with others. It was inevitable that she lived not far from her. Originally, the daughters of the important ministers of the court lived closer and better than the other manors. "Are you okay?" The two of them were very happy after reporting their positions. Zhang Qilan suddenly leaned over and pointed at the beauties who were still waiting in line with a red face. She said vaguely. Her words reminded Xiao Wanru of her own situation just now, and her face flushed again. "I'm okay." "It's not okay. It's better to go back to the mansion early." Zhang Qilan sighed and said helplessly. "Don't you want to attend the consort selection?" Xiao Wanru looked sideways at Zhang Qilan. Zhang Qilan was also very good-looking, beautiful, and a little cute. "I don't want to." Zhang Qilan shook her head. She disliked coming to the palace the most. She was restrained everywhere and not free at all. Every time she followed her mother into the palace, she felt uncomfortable. "What did your father say?" Xiao Wanru hesitated and asked. "Father means that I may not be selected." Zhang Qilan lowered her voice and moved closer to Xiao Wanru. Then she looked around and saw that the two misses were also talking in a low voice and didn't notice them. She lowered her voice and said, I heard that your big sister will definitely be selected. Which prince's mansion will she go to? I don't know. Xiao Wanru shook her head calmly. Your big sister is so outstanding, and it is said that she is the first beauty. If the first beauty doesn't enter the royal family, will she fall into an ordinary family? Zhang Qilan curled her lips and said, she had met Xiao Yinru several times. The first Miss Xiao looked very dignified and decent, but she always felt that she was too fake. It seemed that the first Miss Xiao was perfect without any flaws. In her brother's words, few women could compare with the first Miss Xiao's talent and appearance since ancient times. What's more, the first Miss Xiao's identity was extraordinary. She was the kind of woman that the young master of an aristocratic family was most willing to marry. Xiao Wanru's heart skipped a beat and she asked in a low voice, It's said outside? Yes, don't you know? Everyone has been talking about it before, but they have been talking about it the most in the past 2 days. They also said that the reason why Madame of Duke Xing went to Yue Nunnery was to pray to the Buddha for the first Miss Xiao. Zhang Qilan nodded. Xiao Wanru's face showed a trace of strangeness. She remembered the topic that she had heard from the idle people outside in the carriage just now, and the noise of people crowding in front of Xiao Yinru's carriage. If it was said that Madame of Duke Xing was going to pray to the Buddha for the first Miss Xiao, it would be very accurate. What was the point of making a wish at this time? She couldn't go, but she asked her mother to go up the mountain with the excuse of being sick. That was to say, this wish couldn't be known by others. It couldn't be known by others, and it was particularly important. She had to enter the palace at the time of the consort selection, and there were rumors outside that Xiao Yinru would definitely be selected. An idea flashed in her mind. She suddenly felt that she might know why Xiao Yinru didn't enter any prince's mansion in the last life, but entered the palace. If she was a minister, she would inevitably be attacked by the emperor because of her great achievements. If she was a woman, she would easily deal with the members of the royal family. In addition, she had the power behind her and seemed to want to push her to the position of empress, which was enough to arouse the emperor's fear. Before the consort selection was announced, no one would know the final answer. Guessing the emperor's mind without authorization and acting as if she deserved it and was sure to win, not only would it make the emperor unhappy, but it would also affect the decision of the crown prince. Xiao Yinru raised the corner of her mouth slightly. She wanted to control this matter, but she didn't think that going too far was as bad as not going far enough. Of course, there might be other people adding fuel to the fire. But no matter what, it was certain that Xiao Yinru's trip to the palace would not be successful. Madame of Duke Xing in your mansion really went to fulfill the vow for your big sister. What vow did she fulfill? Why didn't she just say it was to fulfill the vow, but didn't say it clearly? Seeing Xiao Wanru in a daze, Zhang Qilan reached out to pull her sleeve and shook it. I really don't know. It's true that second aunt is not in good health, Xiao Wanru said with a bitter smile. She didn't expect things to develop in this direction. Is she really sick? Zhang Qilan said in disbelief. She is really sick. Xiao Wanru didn't hide it. Others didn't know about this kind of thing, but there were many people in the palace who knew about it. After all, honored consort Shu's accident at that time involved a lot of people. If people like Prime Minister Zhang inquired carefully, they would definitely be able to find out. All right, she really thought that she was born to be a phoenix. Zhang Qilan muttered and relaxed. She thought there was some important inside story, but it turned out that there was no inside story. It was just hearsay. Born to be a phoenix? Xiao Wanru quivered, and her watery eyes widened. She looked at Zhang Qilan in astonishment. She could be sure that this news was definitely not spread by Duke Xing's mansion. As soon as she finished speaking, her mouth was covered by Zhang Qilan. Speak softly. In fact, Xiao Wanru's voice was already very soft. Xiao Wanru shook her head at her, indicating that she would be softer. Zhang Qilan approached Xiao Wanru with sweat all over her head. I don't know if it's true. I also eavesdropped. Where did you eavesdrop? Xiao Wanru asked in confusion. In fact, it's also a very occasional opportunity. I went to Huaguang Temple with my father to listen to scriptures, and my father sent me out. I played outside for a while and felt bored, so I went back. I was afraid that my father would send me away again, so I sneaked back. When I passed by the back of a meditation room, I happened to hear someone talking about it. In fact, I just heard it, and I don't know if it's true or not. Talking to your father? Xiao Wanru asked. Not my father. My father is still in a meditation room in front, and the space between the meditation rooms is empty, Zhang Qilan said. I didn't dare to listen too much. Later, when I sneaked out, I met my father. My father also told me not to talk nonsense and said that I heard it wrong. You can't tell anyone now. Zhang Qilan said, and her voice became lower and lower. Although she was naive, she was not ignorant. This kind of inborn phoenix fate could not be said casually. It was a matter of life and death. Xiao Wanru frowned slightly. Although Zhang Qilan said that she had only heard it, Xiao Wanru believed that someone had really said so. Don't worry, I won't talk nonsense. The people inside didn't speak loudly, but I vaguely heard something like inborn phoenix fate and the myths of Duke Xing's mansion. After that, I didn't dare to listen too much. When Zhang Qilan talked about it, she still felt a lingering fear. When she came out from the back, she found that there were guards in front, but they were not from her mansion. I heard that the abbot of Huaguang Temple is proficient in Dharma and is very famous. Xiao Wanru said thoughtfully. That's what they said, but I don't know if it's true. Zhang Qilan said indifferently. She reached out to pull Xiao Wanru and said, Look, they are almost done. Let's go back to the flower hall. Xiao Wanru looked up at the few people in the team and nodded. When they returned to the flower hall, the nannies were already calling the roll. They were divided into two groups, one on the left and the other on the right. Chapter 734. The number of people on the left and right was about the same, but the people on the left were superior to the people on the right in terms of bearing, appearance, and overall feeling. Xiao Wanru and Zhang Qilan also stood on the left. Xiao Yanru had already stood there. Even Xiao Tahuan was there, but Xiao Kailing was on the right. Xiao Wanru only took a glance and knew that the people on the right should be those who had failed. It was not surprising that Xiao Kailing failed, but Xiao Caihuan was also selected. Fifth sister, where have you been? My two sisters have been looking for you for a long time just now. Xiao Yanru was a dignified and decent elder sister, so she naturally came over and asked softly. I met Miss Zhang and talked with her for a while. I made you worried. Xiao Wanru said. It's good that you're back. Let's wait first. Xiao Yanru smiled and said in a low voice. She glanced at Xiao Caihuan standing beside her and felt very uncomfortable. Sure enough, after all the beauties were divided into two sides, a nanny in charge came out and told the beauties on the right that they had failed and asked them to pack up their things and go back now. As soon as they entered the palace to put down their things, they were driven back. Some of them were confused, some of them cried, and some of them were very happy. They hurried back to pack up their things so that they could catch dinner at home. When all the beauties on the right left, the flower hall immediately became much emptier. Xiao Wanru's eyes calmly swept over the beauties who stayed. No matter what they thought in their hearts, at least they looked calm on the surface. Compared with the various postures of the beauties on the right when they left, these beauties were obviously better at hiding their emotions. Xiao Yanru lowered her head, looked down at her toes, and quietly listened to the nanny in charge of the palace talking about various rules in the palace. She also warned them that if they were not brought along, their range of activities was limited to Chuxiu Palace. If they were disobedient and offended the nobles in the palace, they would bear the consequences. This so-called taking responsibility for the consequences was not only her own problem, it might even implicate the family behind her. As soon as she said this, the beauties became even quieter, and some of their faces turned pale with fear. The uneasy atmosphere made the originally calm scene a little uneasy. After the nanny in charge threatened them, she said what would happen next. Next, the beauties would receive various etiquette training. Painters would come to draw portraits for them and then send them to the empress for the empress to choose. After the nanny in charge finished speaking, she no longer restrained the beauties. Today was the first day of entering the palace, and these beauties were very tired. All the courses would be held tomorrow. When the caretaker mama announced that they had dispersed, everyone relaxed and walked out in twos and threes. At least they had passed the step. Xiao Wanru, Zhang Qilan, and a group of beauties walked back together. They walked together for a while, and in order to talk, they fell behind the crowd. Qi Rongji looked at Qi Rongji with complicated eyes. Wanru of the crowd. Of the crowd. She also came to participate in the election and was indeed selected. But she really had no idea what would happen next. During the 3 years in Duke Xing's mansion, she was no longer the arrogant Qi Rongji in Jiangzhou. Xiao Yanru was very outstanding, but now she had to admit that Xiao Wanru was also outstanding. She was so outstanding that she was jealous. Compared with Xiao Yanru, she was more jealous of Xiao Wanru. Both of them came from the same place. She was more outstanding than Xiao Wanru at that time. She looked down on Xiao Wanru very much at that time. She thought that Xiao Wanru was just an orphan picked up by General Qin on the battlefield with no parents. Unexpectedly, after entering the capital city, Xiao Wanru became the eldest lineal daughter of the former heir of Duke Xing. Even if she tried her best, she only got the title of Madam of Duke Xing's adopted daughter, and even delayed her marriage because of this title. Why could Xiao Wanru live so well? When she saw Xiao Wanru's gentle smile just now, she felt more and more hurt. But no matter how hurt her heart was, she now knew the gap between them, so she did not take the initiative to get close to her. Her elder brother said that several people from Duke Xing's mansion should also be there for the consort selection in the palace this time. He told her to be careful. That first miss was a scheming person, and Xiao Wanru was not easy to deal with. She would hide from them for now. One day in the future, when she stepped on others to get a position, she would see how they would kneel in front of her and beg for mercy. After making up her mind, Qi Rongji was more and more unwilling to be found by the misses of Duke Xing's mansion. Her elder brother told her to keep a low profile and said that he would arrange it. Her room was in the very back area. There were few people along the way. Most of the people left were in the front area closer to the palace gate of Chuxiu Palace. Compared with them, she was almost not good enough, but this was her only chance. Even if her status was low, she wanted to enter the prince's mansion. This was her only chance. She had been delayed for so long. Her status was not obvious, and her family background was not high. Now she was old, and it was even more difficult for her to choose a marriage. She sat silently in the room and gritted her teeth. Xiao Wanru didn't know that Qi Rongji had also come in, and she wanted to enter the prince's mansion like Xiao Yanru. She talked with Zhang Qilan and walked very slowly. When they reached the intersection where they separated, the two of them had fallen behind, and the people in front had disappeared. After separating from Zhang Qilan, Xiao Wanru turned around and was about to go to her residence, but she saw Xiao Xuanzi's smiling face at the intersection in front of her. She could only go forward. "Fifth miss, our prince invites you over." Xiao Xuanzi smiled and came out from behind the bushes where he had been hiding. He bowed respectfully to Xiao Wanru and said, "Now." Xiao Wanru looked at the sky. Although it was not evening yet, it was the time when the sun was setting in the west. The winter days had originally fallen early. Yes, just like this. It will be very soon. Xiao Xuanzi said with a smile and reached out to lead the way. Looking at him, she knew that she had to go. Xiao Wanru walked forward helplessly. They had just chosen a round. Those who should leave were still packing their luggage, and those who did not leave were also resting. At this time, no one knew where the palace maids had gone, and it was quiet at the palace gate. Xiao Wanru followed Xiao Xuanzi out of the gate of Chuxiu Palace and walked out. After walking for a while, she found that this route did not seem to lead to the back door of Prince Chen's mansion where Chu Luchen was. "Where are we going now?" "I'm waiting for you in front. We're almost there." Xiao Xuanzi smiled and pointed forward. Xiao Wanru looked in the direction of his finger and saw a familiar pavilion, just behind the rockery in front of her. She clenched the handkerchief in her hand tightly and slowed down her steps. How could she not know the pavilion in front of her? In her last life, she lived here after entering the palace. This place was very close to Chuxiu Palace, and it was very convenient for the beauties to come over to draw portraits. At that time, there were 4 painters, 3 men and 1 woman, who painted portraits for the palace maids. She was one of them, but the other 3 lived in another place far away from her. Only she lived in the pavilion in front of her. There was a reason why she was separated from the other painters. On the one hand, it was because she was a woman, and there could only be 3 painters living there. On the other hand, it was because of Chi Baiyu's secret help that she could have such a quiet residence without having to squeeze with others. Prince, why are you here? This was originally used by our master to rest, and it is also close to the side door of Prince Chen's mansion. The Empress Dowager was afraid that our master would be tired from walking sometimes and had no place to rest, so she gave this place to our master to rest. Xiao Xuanzi said indifferently. Xiao Wanru's fingers holding the handkerchief trembled, and something seemed to flash through her mind. Your master has been using it? Yes, our master has been using it all the time. Everyone in the palace knows that the whole building was decorated by our master himself. Our master likes it here very much, and other nobles in the palace know that. But now there are so many people, our master may not come here often. Xiao Xuanzi said. He led Xiao Wanru along the winding path. It seemed to be right in front of them, but in fact, there was still a long way to go. Will your master abandon this pavilion? Xiao Wanru thought for a while and said, or will he give it to someone else to live in? How could it be possible? Our master likes this place the most. It is better than the palace where our master lived before. That palace is still empty. The Empress Dowager wants our master to live in the palace sometimes and doesn't have to go back, but our master doesn't want to. He would rather rest here for a night sometimes than go back to the palace where he lived when he was a child. Xiao Xuanzi shook his head repeatedly. The handkerchief in Xiao Wanru's palm was sweating. She could feel the slight dampness in the handkerchief. Her fingers moved slowly, as if she hadn't moved for many years. It is said that the Chushio Palace is looking for a painter to draw a portrait. This place is so close to the Chushio Palace. Will this place be requisitioned and ask the painter to draw the portrait of the beauties? Xiao Wanru heard her extremely calm voice. This voice sounded calm and indifferent to others, but for her, she felt that it was as if she didn't say it. No, everyone in the palace knows that this place belongs to our master. Even the Empress won't ask to requisition this place. Xiao Xuanzi smiled and felt that 5th Miss Xiao was really interesting today. She kept asking his master to give up this place, which was different from the past. Could it be that 5th Miss Xiao had other intentions? Thinking of this, Xiao Xuanzi asked tentatively, 5th Miss, do you want to live in this place? Xiao Xuanzi thought it was very possible. This place was much better than the Chushio Palace. Of course, if it was asked by others, Xiao Xuanzi would think it was too whimsical. His master would never give up this place. But if it was 5th Miss Xiao, Xiao Xuanzi thought it should not be a big problem. No, it's more suitable for me to live in it. Xiao Wanru shook her head. Of course, she wouldn't have such an idea. After thinking for a while, she still couldn't let go of the strange feeling in her heart and asked, does your master not like this place? Chapter 735. How could my master not like this place? Some of the decorations here were chosen by my master himself. If he really didn't like them, he wouldn't have given them to others. Xiao Xuanzi said indifferently. His master had occupied this place for a long time. There were many things here that his master liked, and some rare ones were chosen by him himself. The door was in front of her. There was no one guarding it, and it looked empty. Looking in, the room seemed to be small, but Xiao Wanru knew that there was a staircase on the right after entering the door. The upstairs was where she used to live. It was well lit and had a good scenery. In her last life, she would be in a daze upstairs when she had nothing to do. Compared with her previous experiences, the time when she was in a daze in the attic seemed to be the quietest scene in her memory. She went up the stairs and entered the room. As expected, she saw a wide rattan chair facing the sunlight at the window. On the windowsill, there was an exquisite vase with a few red plums in it. The light-colored curtains were hung high, and the gauze curtain was also half hung on one side. The hanging edge was in the shape of silver plum blossoms. In the center of the plum blossoms, there was a little stamen made of cat's eye stone, which was very beautiful and elegant. Xiao Wanru trembled all over, almost uncontrollably. This scene was exactly the same as what she saw in her memory. That day, when she was brought here, she saw the scene in front of her. She was so shocked at that time. Everything in front of her was so quiet and perfect that she almost couldn't help liking it. After she moved in, she didn't dare to move anything here, and she was unwilling to move. Everything was arranged as before, even the rattan chair by the window had been in the same position. How could she not be excited when she saw this place again in 2 lives? Everything seemed to be at the starting point, but she knew nothing about it. Her eyes turned red inexplicably. Did she forget something important? What's wrong? A gentle voice came into her ears. It was Chu Liuchen's voice. Is this your favorite place, Your Highness? She sniffed hard and had made up her mind. She turned her head and looked at Chu Liuchen with a smile. It's not bad here. Chu Liuchen's eyes fell on Xiao Wanru's eyes. Seeing the redness in her eyes and the tears in her eyes, his eyes darkened a little. She walked to the big rattan chair in front of the window and sat down. She looked up at Xiao Wanru, pointed to a smaller rattan chair beside her and said, "You can sit here." Only then did Xiao Wanru notice that there was a small rattan chair in front of the big rattan chair. She was too excited just now and didn't notice it for a while, so it was different. At least in the last life, there was no such a small rattan chair. Taking a deep breath, she walked over and sat down on the rattan chair. She raised her watery eyes and looked at Chu Liuchen. Seeing him squinting his eyes and sitting lazily on the big rattan chair, she felt an inexplicable bitterness in her heart. Xiao Xuanzi served tea and retreated to the door with a smile. After thinking for a while, he went downstairs to ask someone to prepare pastries. The 5th miss was still in the draft before, so she should be hungry. Were you wrong just now? Chu Liuchen asked casually. His question was out of the blue, but Xiao Wanru understood it at once. She shook her head, lowered her head with a slightly red face, and said, "There was a nanny just now, was she yours?" Her words were also very vague. She really couldn't say it out loud. How could she say whether the nanny who let her go in the first test was Chu Liuchen's? As long as she thought of how she should pass the so-called first test, her face would burn. How could she say this kind of thing out loud? Chu Liuchen obviously understood it. He looked at her with a smile and said, "Did she embarrass you?" Xiao Wanru's face became redder. In that situation, it was the best. At least she still kept her underwear. Next, there will be a painter to specially paint for you. Do you want to paint earlier or later? Chu Liuchen looked at Xiao Wanru's blushing little face in a very good mood. It was rare to see this girl like this. Don't interfere in this kind of thing. Xiao Wanru shook her head and refused. It was really not a good thing to attract attention first, whether it was the first or the last. If the beauty of the draft showed up before the final conclusion, it was easier to be framed, especially when there was Xiao Yanru, who was eyeing her covetously. She could be sure that Xiao Yanru would inevitably have an accident. She was not afraid of Xiao Yanru, but she was afraid that it would not be good if Chu Liuchen was involved in this kind of thing. It's not a big deal. Even if I interfere, the Empress will not say anything. Imperial grandmother will explain it to her clearly. Chu Liuchen said indifferently. He really didn't want to comment on Xiao Wanru. Since he had confirmed that she would marry into his mansion, he only needed to know whether she was good or bad. Originally, he wanted to ask Imperial grandmother to marry her directly, but Imperial grandmother said that it was better to go through the procedure first. It's not good. Xiao Wanru shook her head and refused. Her watery eyes glanced at a painting on another table. She stood up, walked to the table, and looked at the signature of Lay Buddhist of Weiyu Pavilion on the painting. She ran her trembling fingers across the paper and asked, "Where is Weiyu Pavilion?" "It's a courtyard in the south of the Yangtze River. I've been there and I think it's good." Chu Liuchen didn't hide it and asked with a smile, "Why? Do you know it's me?" Xiao Wanru had asked him this question that day, but he just gave it a casual answer at that time. As for the name, he just said it casually and didn't take it seriously. After that, he asked someone to carve a seal and used this name. After that, he liked to use this signature when he painted. In fact, it didn't mean anything special. "I don't know, but this name is really nice." Xiao Wanru lowered her head and gently slid her fingers across the signature to hide the excitement and tears in her eyes. She pressed the corner of the table with the other hand. Because of the force, The knuckles on the back of her hand were protruding. She was really silly. It turned out that the person in her missing memory was Chu Luchan. It turned out that they didn't meet for the first time in this life, but in the last life. Some of her painting skills were taught by Chu Luchan, but she forgot him. She couldn't remember all kinds of things about him, everything about him, and how good he was. There were so many thoughts in her mind that she almost didn't know what to say. She couldn't tell what she felt. She was sad, she seemed to be happy, and she even felt excited. I was thinking about whether I should change the name. Since I think it sounds nice, I'll use it. You seem to have asked me before, but it seems that my paintings haven't been sold out yet. Chu Luchan also came over. His handsome eyes fell on Xiao Wanru with a gentle smile. It seemed that he didn't notice all the excitement Xiao Wanru showed, but there was a deep look at the bottom of his eyes. He didn't have many paintings, and he named it casually. How did Xiao Wanru know it? She had asked him last time, but now she said so. It seemed that there was another secret, so he wouldn't press her. Chu Luchan was very satisfied with Xiao Wanru's straightforwardness. A gentle smile slowly appeared in his eyes. He reached out to touch Xiao Wanru's hair gently and said softly, "If you want to come over in the future, you can come by yourself. I've already told them to come here." His voice was very gentle, even with a little doting that Xiao Wanru could hear clearly. She looked up subconsciously and saw Chu Luchan's handsome eyes. His eyes were very beautiful. The slanting light of the setting sun fell on the corners of his eyes, as if there were thousands of tenderness. She blinked, and her long eyelashes fluttered twice. Her heart seemed to be hit heavily by something. It was soft, sour, and even astringent. There seemed to be a voice in her heart repeating his name over and over again. Her eyes turned red involuntarily, and she couldn't control her tears anymore. She reached out to grab his sleeve, bit her lip again and again, trying to suppress the sadness, touching, or something else at the bottom of her lips. She couldn't tell clearly, but only felt that her tears fell uncontrollably. In her memory, Chu Luchan was fierce and violent. The palace was full of blood, and the gorgeous beauties were lying on the ground or on the steps one by one. The bloody steps paved his high road to imperial power, so she had been careful to guard against him. Even though the relationship between them had changed a lot unconsciously, she was still a little vigilant. After her rebirth, she was very careful with every step she took. She was afraid that if she took a wrong step, she would be consigned to eternal damnation like she was in her previous life. Even if she was sad and crying, she would forcefully suppress herself. Her heart was filled with coldness. She staggered alone on this road that led to an unknown place, lonely and fearful. With the shadow of the last life, even though she had always been strong in front of others and even tried to control everything in her hands, she still had a fragile heart. She was afraid that she would make the same mistake again. But now, she didn't want to think about anything. She just cried wantonly, even in front of Chu Luchan, whom she had been vigilant against. She had thought that after her rebirth, she had nothing to fear. A person who had died once should be the strongest. She had never thought that she would be so fragile and out of control, and she cried so uncontrollably. In fact, she should express her apology. In the last life, Chu Luchan appeared in her life, and he was very kind to her. He even taught her to learn painting and gave his resting place to her. At that time, she not only had a bad reputation, but was also a person with bad luck. It could even be said that if she hadn't entered the palace, she would have been drowned in the pond at that time. After all, when Shichi had died at that time, and she had no one to rely on, not even a home. She was even driven out of the Wen's mansion with such a bad reputation. If the Wen's mansion had continued to take action, it was very likely that she would have been drowned in the pond. With the help of Duke Xing's mansion, she was bound to end up. She had never thought that Qi Baiyu didn't have such great ability. Even if he had also stepped into the officialdom at that time, it was impossible. His noble was also a general. But even so, it was impossible for him to reach into the palace and let the palace allow her to enter the palace to paint for beauties. Chapter 736. If someone hadn't strongly recommended her, she wouldn't have been able to enter the Imperial Palace at that time. No matter what kind of person Chu Luchan was, he had always been kind to her. It could even be said that he saved her and treated her very well. However, she forgot him and all the good memories of him. There was only warmth in her memory. It could be seen that they got along very well at that time. However, she had forgotten all of them. I'm sorry. Xiao Wanru cried uncontrollably. Her whole body was trembling, but she tried hard to raise her eyes to see Chu Liuchen's face clearly. This person treated her very well in the last life. She was sorry for him. Chu Liuchen was also startled by Xiao Wanru's sudden crying. He reached out his hand as if to touch her face, but he was worried that she would be scared. He frowned and looked at her with concern. Suddenly, he reached out to hold her in his arms and coaxed her gently. Well, don't cry. Be good. Tell me what happened and I'll help you get revenge. Xiao Wanru's face was covered with tears. She snuggled against his chest with mixed feelings and listened to the steady and powerful heartbeat in his chest. For a moment, she felt more and more aggrieved. In fact, she shouldn't feel aggrieved. It was him who felt aggrieved, right? He was the one who should feel aggrieved. In the last life, he should have been very good to her, but she forgot him and didn't remember anything. She only remembered that everything here was helped by Qi Baiyu. Without him, how could she rely on the protection of this corner of the Imperial Palace and live a peaceful life for a period of time? It was all because of the person in front of her, but she forgot him. She felt that she should apologize, but she couldn't say 1,000 words in her heart. I didn't. She wanted to explain that it wasn't someone who bullied her, but she was the one who bullied him, but the words couldn't come out of her mouth. Complicated and sad emotions entangled her, filling her chest and making her feel like she didn't know what to say. Xiao Xuanzi ran up from downstairs in a panic. Seeing his master holding Xiao Wanru in his arms, he sneaked down. Although he didn't know what happened, his master looked very distressed and gentle, which was completely different from the master who couldn't smile from the bottom of his heart in the past. Xiao Xuanzi had seen clearly a long time ago that his master treated 5th Miss Xiao differently. Alright, stop crying. If you continue to cry, it will seem as if this king has done something to you. Chu Liuchen said softly. Seeing Xiao Wanru crying out of control in his arms, he felt both angry and happy. He reached out and hugged her tightly. This time, she did not resist and quietly nestled in his arms, which made him inexplicably satisfied. There was a part of his heart that was already in a mess. As long as she did not cry, in fact, he could do anything. Don't cry, oh. He lowered his head and looked at the tearful face of the beautiful lady. His thin lips gently fell. Xiao Wanru watched in astonishment as Chu Liuchen gently kissed her lips. It was very gentle and soft. Under her long eyelashes, she blinked her tearful eyes again and again. At this time, she should push him away. Even if there was an agreement between them, she should push him away. Otherwise, it would be going against the female teachings and rules she had learned for many years. However, she was unwilling to push him away. She didn't know what it was like in her previous life or this life, but she knew that she didn't want to push him away anymore. Since her rebirth, her heart had never been so uncontrollable. As if sensing Xiao Wanru's acceptance, Chu Liuchen uncontrollably increased the strength of his hands. This time, his lips covered hers heavily, as if there were thousands of feelings that were about to burst out. After a long time, the two of them separated. Xiao Wanru leaned against Chu Liuchen's arms. Although she was still sobbing in a low voice, she was actually not crying. Not only did she stop crying, but her face was as red as blood. She subconsciously hooked the corner of Chu Liuchen's sleeve with her hands and blushed with shame. Chu Liuchen lowered his head slightly and only saw a simple hairpin around the top of her black hair. There was a trace of joy on his thin lips. "Zhuozhua, you like me?" His voice was a little hoarse, which was different from his usual clear voice. It inexplicably made Xiao Wanru blush more, but what made her blush more was Chu Liuchen's joyful and slightly trembling words. When did Chu Liuchen, who seemed to have everything in his hands, say words with a trembling voice? He tightened his hands on her waist, and Xiao Wanru felt that her slender waist was almost broken. She took a deep breath and gently pushed him, signaling him to let go. "Zhuozhua, I like you." He loosened his grip a little, which allowed Xiao Wanru to take a few breaths of relief. After hearing the low and hoarse voice in her ear, Chu Luchen lowered his head and rested it on Xiao Wanru's shoulder. After saying this, he seemed to feel relieved all of a sudden. The corners of his thin lips were slightly raised. What was the deal? What was interesting? Happy or unhappy? At the moment when he relaxed, he immediately understood. He didn't know where the love came from, but the deep love was actually just a thin layer of window paper. But if he didn't pierce it, he would never know his feelings. Zhuozhuo, I like you, he said affirmatively again without any hesitation. Since he had decided on her, he naturally had to let her know. This time, there was joy in his affirmation, which was more like a domineering declaration or an eager expression of his feelings. He raised his head and kissed her red earlobe gently this time. The soft touch made Xiao Wanru's heart palpitate, and she involuntarily clenched his sleeves. After thinking for a while, she nodded gently and drove away all the hesitation in her heart. This was an indescribable feeling, which she had never experienced before. Her heart beat so violently that she almost thought it was going to jump out of her throat, but she was also extremely happy. It was a feeling that she could not care less no matter what. Originally, she only wanted to be his shield, and she was willing to be his shield, and she was willing to leave when he needed her. But now, she was no longer willing to leave, nor was she willing to be his shield. Even if she was a shield, she only wanted it to be a permanent one. There were some things that she wouldn't understand if she didn't think about it. But when she thought about it deliberately, she found that he had done a lot for her, but she had always thought that he had ulterior motives. Master, Empress Dowager invites you to go over. Xiao Xuanzi went upstairs again, stood at the stairway with his head down, and reported from a distance. Xiao Wanru suddenly came to her senses and reached out to push Chu Luchen away in a panic. But when she saw Chu Luchen stagger a few steps, she hurriedly pulled his sleeves. Chu Luchen didn't expect Xiao Wanru to suddenly push him, so he took 2 steps back and stood firm. Master! Xiao Xuanzi was startled when he heard the voice. When he looked up, he happened to see Chu Luchen stagger a few steps back and said anxiously, "Go down first." Chu Luchen flicked his sleeves and said. Xiao Xuanzi didn't dare to say more and hurriedly went downstairs. In fact, he didn't want to come up. At a glance, he knew that 5th Miss Xiao was aggrieved and his master was comforting her. At this time, if he went up, he would be scolded. But he had to go up. The people sent by Empress Dowager were downstairs. Moreover, he was afraid that 5th Miss Xiao would suddenly cry like just now. If the people sent by Empress Dowager heard it, it would be another trouble. Don't cry anymore? Chu Luchen took Xiao Wanru's little hand, which was tightly grasping his sleeve, and said with a smile. Xiao Wanru didn't know what to say for a moment. She bit her lip and lowered her head. Well, don't cry. Look at your swollen eyes. If someone sees it later, they will say that you have been bullied by me. Chu Luchen said with a smile. He reached out to lift her chin and looked at her face. He, who was smiling with tears in his eyes, looked affectionate and gentle. I'm sorry. Will it be bad for you? Xiao Wanru blushed, reached out to slap his hand away, and lowered her head again. At this time, she was at a loss and didn't know what to do. Her heart, which had always been able to control the situation, was beating in a mess. She was at a loss, as if she couldn't remember anything. It doesn't matter. Don't let others think that someone bullied you. I'll go to Imperial grandmother's place first. If you need anything in the future, you can come here to find people. These people who stay here are all my people, Chu Luchen said with a faint smile. His eyes slid across Xiao Wanru's red lips, and his eyes became more and more deep. Xiao Wanru's red lips were redder than ordinary people's. At this time, they were not only redder, but also slightly swollen. Then go quickly, Xiao Wanru said. She reached out and gently pushed him, and her mind slowly became clear. Since Empress Dowager came to find him at this time, and Xiao Xuanzi specially came up to tell him, there must be something. Okay, I'll ask someone to send you back, Chu Luchen said with the corners of his mouth raised high. He was in a very good mood. No, it's not good to be seen by others. Xiao Wanru shook her head and refused. What's wrong with it? Imperial grandmother has long known that you are my people, And so does my uncle. Since they know it, who dares to say anything? My people are originally different from them. Chu Luchen said extremely arrogantly. His arrogant attitude, coupled with his elegant voice, was actually extremely weird, as if it was extremely incongruous. Xiao Wanru couldn't help but burst into laughter. Such a domineering tone really shouldn't be the style of Prince Qin, who looked as gentle as jade. Seeing that she finally laughed, Chu Luchen also raised the corners of his mouth and said in a very good mood, "Go back first. You can come here at any time, but if you want to see me, you have to inform me in advance." Hearing his words, Xiao Wanru blushed and said, "I don't want to see you." "But I want to see you," Chu Luchen said with a smile and suddenly reached out to hug Xiao Wanru again. This time he moved very quickly. Before Xiao Wanru could react, he had put down his hands. Xiao Wanru's face flushed again. She bit her lip, suppressed the shyness in her heart, composed herself, and changed the topic. "Your Highness, do you know the saying that people are destined to be born with the phoenix?" "Destined to be born with the phoenix? What is it?" Chu Luchen tilted his head to look at her. Chapter 737. Xiao Wanru lowered her head more and hurriedly said, "I heard it from Prime Minister Zhang's daughter. She said that she heard someone in Huaguang Temple say that she was destined to marry the emperor and mentioned Xiao Yanru." Chu Luchen had always known that she and Xiao Yanru did not get along well with each other, so there was no need to hide it from him and show her sisterly love with Xiao Yanru in front of him. Chu Luchen was not in a hurry to answer. He took her back to the previous rattan chair and sat down. Then he leisurely pulled the rattan chair he had sat down next to Xiao Wanru and leaned against it. Xiao Yanru was destined to marry the emperor? After sitting down, he asked. Xiao Wanru looked up and saw his lazy eyes. She nodded and said, "It's true." Zhang Qilan said that she heard it and there were guards guarding her, but it was not her father. Destined to marry the emperor? That's a good idea. Chu Luchen thought for a while and suddenly smiled. Destined to marry the emperor, she would naturally marry the person who was destined to sit on the throne. Now the position of the crown prince had not been decided. His uncle's thoughts were hard to guess, but Chu Luchen could guess a little. The so-called destined to marry the emperor was really a good idea. "Your Highness, you don't know?" Xiao Wanru asked. She had guessed whether it was Chu Liuchen's people who released the news. It was a good thing to use the so-called destined to marry the emperor well, but it was not a good thing to use it badly. "I haven't thought about how to deal with your mansion. Zhuozhua, what do you think?" Chu Luchen said with a smile in a very quiet voice. It was really hard to imagine that he was an extremely ambitious person just by listening to his voice. "Let's wait." Xiao Wanru lowered her head and thought. The blush on her face slowly faded, and a trace of hostility flashed in her eyes. If it was really as she guessed that the death of her parents was related to the current second branch, she would never spare Duke Xing's mansion. "Since you said so, let's do it this way. As for the destined to marry the emperor, you don't have to worry about it. Since someone has released such a rumor, it must be Duke Xing's mansion or Chu Luiyue and Chu Liuzhou. But no matter who it is, don't interfere in this matter," Chu Luchen said. Hearing this, Xiao Wanru felt numb on her back, but she knew that this was the truth. The so-called inborn phoenix must involve a lot of things, and it was definitely not something that a weak girl like her could intervene in. Even if she was reborn, she could not intervene in such a major event related to the imperial court. Nodding his head, he said, "I won't talk about this matter anymore." "That's good. Do you want to rest here for a while or go back?" Chu Luchen smiled and changed the topic. "I'd better go back first. I've been out for a long time. If I don't go back, I'm afraid Yujie will look for me." Xiao Wanru stood up, looked out of the window and said, Outside the window, the sun was setting, and it was about to get dark. When Yujie saw the others coming back, she must be flustered before she went back. "Don't worry, I've already sent someone to inform your maid." Chu Luchen also stood up with a smile, looked down at Xiao Wanru, and said, "Why don't you stay here for dinner before leaving?" "I better go back. Xiao Yanru will be suspicious." Xiao Wanru's face inexplicably blushed again. There was a trace of affection in Chu Liuchen's words, which made her feel very ashamed to sit down again. Moreover, There were some things that she had to go back and think about thoroughly. Well, I'll ask someone to send you back. Chu Luchen said softly. No, it'll be inconvenient for others to see us. Xiao Wanru thought for a while and thought it was better to refuse. Chuxiu Palace is not far ahead, and you can see it from here. Although she didn't stand at the windowsill to look out at the scenery just now, she had stood there many times in her last life, so she was not surprised that she could see Chuxiu Palace at a glance from that position. Well, be careful when you go back. Chu Luchen thought for a while and found it was true, so he did as she said. He took her hand to the top of the stairs, squeezed her hand a little harder, and watched her go downstairs. Master, the Empress Dowager's people are urging you again. Xiao Xuanzi went upstairs again and saw Chu Luchen standing at the small window of the stairs looking out, so he gently reminded him. The palace servant sent by the Empress Dowager was taken inside to wait, so he didn't see 5th Miss Xiao go downstairs, but he had been paying attention to the outside. When he saw the guard make a gesture to him, he knew that 5th Miss Xiao had left, so he went upstairs again to report. Find out who else went to Huaguang Temple when Prime Minister Zhang went there, and who asked the abbot of Huaguang Temple to tell his fortune. Chu Luchen put his hands behind his back and said lightly. In fact, this kind of thing was not difficult to find out. The abbot of Huaguang Temple could tell people's fortune for a long time, and it was said that he could tell people's fortune very accurately, but he seldom told people's fortune. Yes, I'll find out about it later. Xiao Xuanzi answered, knowing that his master must have found something again. Chu Luchen walked down and said, Send someone to protect 5th Miss in secret. Qing didn't follow Xiao Wanru into the palace, so it was naturally inconvenient for her 2 secret guards to enter the palace, but he could send someone else here. Master, this is in the palace. This time, Xiao Xuanzi didn't answer quickly, but reminded him carefully. Some people in the palace rarely took action, and they would only take action at the most critical time. I know it's in the palace. If I can't protect my own woman in the palace, what's the use of it? Chu Luchen said in a cold voice. The light at the top of the stairs dimmed, and his handsome face seemed to be hidden in the darkness, revealing a cold and bloodthirsty aura. Xiao Xuanzi shivered with fear and hurriedly said, Yes, I'll do it right now. When Xiao Wanru came back, it was very noisy at the gate of Chuxiu Palace. Some misses who left the palace were coming out, and soft sedan chairs had been placed at the gate. Some of them were on good terms with them. Some were crying, some were laughing, and some were alone. Xiao Wanru stood at the gate and looked at a palace made with a frown. The corner of her eyes suddenly twitched. She knew this palace maid. Not only did she know her, but she also remembered her very clearly. The last memory of this palace maid was that she followed Xiao Yenru. She was Xiao Yenru's personal palace maid, and she was also Xiao Yenru's confidant. In her last life, she would see this palace maid every time she saw Xiao Yenru. She was Xiao Yenru's most powerful accomplice. 5th sister, where have you been? Xiao Yenru and Xiao Taihuan saw Xiao Kailing off at the gate. Suddenly, they turned their eyes and saw Xiao Wanru. They immediately lifted their skirts and walked over. 4th sister is leaving. I wanted to say goodbye to you just now, but I didn't expect that I couldn't find you. Xiao Yenru looked worried. Xiao Taihuan raised the corner of her mouth mockingly. She thought that Xiao Yenru deserved to be the most famous miss in their mansion. Look at what she said. She said all the good things, as if she had always been the most gentle and decent Mississippi. As for the others, of course, they were just her foils. On the one hand, she meant that Xiao Wanru didn't know etiquette and ran around as soon as she arrived in the Imperial Palace. If something happened, her family might be in trouble. On the other hand, she meant that Xiao Kailing was also shameless. She had been driven out, but she still found various reasons to keep Xiao Wanru here. Big sister, I didn't say that I would wait for 5th sister or look for her. I just don't want to leave 3rd sister, so I just want to talk here for a while. 3rd sister feels uneasy being alone in the Imperial Palace. Xiao Kailing usually didn't like to talk, but it didn't mean that she was convinced by Xiao Yenru. Hearing Xiao Yenru's words, she immediately became impolite and raised her eyebrows. 4th sister, I'm sorry. I thought you were waiting for 5th sister, so I deliberately said a few more words to 3rd sister. Xiao Yanru explained softly with a smile, not getting angry because of Xiao Keiling's sudden change of attitude. Compared with Xiao Keiling, she looked much more dignified and decent, and at the same time, made Xiao Keiling increasingly unreasonable. Xiao Keiling was so angry that she still wanted to say something, but Xiao Zaihuan stopped her and gently pinched her, signaling her to stop talking. Xiao Keiling admired her elder sister wholeheartedly. Fourth younger sister, you should go back first. Help me take care of mother. When I return in the future, I will definitely be filial to mother. Her health is not good, so one of us sisters should stay in the mansion to take care of her. Xiao Zaihuan was much more eloquent than Xiao Keiling, and her words seemed to be very appropriate. As for Xiao Keiling being moved back, she only said that someone should stay to take care of third madam. Compared with Madam of Duke Xing, who was still in the Yuhui nunnery and was said to be in poor health, Xiao Yanru didn't ask about it. The sisters of the third branch seemed to be more filial. If there were many misses from aristocratic families selected in the first batch, they could indeed secretly inform the Imperial Palace. Anyway, it was impossible for all of them to be selected in the end, so why not eliminate them early? It sounded that Xiao Keiling left the Imperial Palace after the agreement, not because she was not outstanding. This reason was better and more harmless to Xiao Keiling. With so many outstanding sisters, fourth Miss Xiao took the initiative to withdraw. Her behavior was impeccable, and her purpose was to take care of her sick mother, which made people feel that she was filial. Xiao Yanru didn't expect that these sisters, who usually didn't talk much, would be so fierce. She was annoyed in her heart. If she had known this, she would have discussed it with her grandmother that day and let them be eliminated in the first batch, lest Xiao Zaihuan pretended to be more filial than her in front of her at this time. Fourth sister is filial, Xiao Yanru said with envy. Big sister, third sister, fifth sister, I'll leave first. Seeing that Xiao Yanru no longer pestered the topic, Xiao Keiling restrained her temper. After all, the third branch had always been very afraid of the second branch. Xiao Keiling just said it out of anger. If it weren't for the fact that she was the only one eliminated among the four sisters and was in a bad mood, she wouldn't have dared to really contradict Xiao Yanru. At this time, she calmed down and naturally became much kinder. After bowing to them together, she took her maid to a soft sedan in front of the Imperial Palace gate. Fifth sister, where did you go just now? Is there someone familiar in the Imperial Palace? Seeing Xiao Keiling leave, Xiao Yanru turned around and looked at Xiao Wanru with a smile. They said the same words, but the meaning was closer than before. Even Xiao Zaihuan stretched her ears to listen to them. Chapter 738. Where can I go? I just want to walk around. I feel a little bored. Xiao Wanru shook her head with a very light smile. After saying that, she ignored them and turned to walk inside. When she passed by the palace maid standing at the door, she turned her eyes and deliberately glanced at her. As expected, she was the loyal palace maid who had followed Xiao Yanru at that time. Seeing Xiao Wanru glance at her, the palace maid bowed respectfully. She had been standing behind them on the right just now and happened to hear their conversation clearly. There were many little palace maids like her in the palace. However, she was really unwilling to stay in the palace until she was sent out of the palace. This was Chushio Palace, where anything was possible. If she could choose a promising one, she would naturally have a bright future. Choosing one from so many beauties to serve as his master in the future, this also required a discerning eye. She stood at the door and wanted to choose a master who she felt had a bright future. Although all the beauties sent out were eliminated, the remaining misses were also related to the eliminated ones, so they would definitely be sent out. Standing at the door and watching for a long time, she felt that the most promising one was the miss in a light pink palace dress, because her appearance was really perfect. With such an outstanding appearance, she would definitely be selected. Therefore, she deliberately leaned toward Xiao Yanru and knew that she was the first miss of Duke Xing's mansion. With an outstanding appearance and a powerful background, even she had heard of the reputation of the first miss of Duke Xing's mansion in the palace. Of course, such a girl had a bright future. But at this time, she saw Xiao Wanru again. After hearing that she was the fifth Miss Xiao, The palace maid hesitated and didn't know who she wanted to be her master. Although she didn't know it now, it didn't prevent her from being very kind to the two misses. After bowing to Xiao Wanru, she bowed deeply to Xiao Yenru, who walked over behind her, very respectfully. Both of them seemed to be very likely to be the first Mississippi. As a small palace maid, she didn't dare to offend either of them. Xiao Yenru didn't care about the flattery of a little palace maid. She just glanced at her slightly and followed Xiao Wanru into the palace gate. She didn't believe that she just walked around casually. Xiao Wanru was not a reckless person. How could she go out for a walk on the first day when she didn't know anything? Fifth sister, fourth sister has gone back. There are only the three of us in the palace. We should take care of each other. Two Duke Xing's mansions can't be written with one stroke. We have to work together to get through this period of time. There was a hidden meaning in Xiao Yenru's words. No one knew what would happen next in the Imperial Palace. It was unknown who would stay and who would be sent out of the Imperial Palace in the end. In the face of the unknown, it was indeed reasonable for a small group of mutual interests to hold each other tightly. Xiao Yenru believed that no matter what Xiao Wanru was up to, she was alone in the Imperial Palace. It was the best for the sisters to hold each other and resist all external forces. Even if the two of them were clearly at odds with each other on the surface, they had to let everyone see that they were at peace. You're worrying too much, big sister. I'm tired, so I won't accompany you two anymore. Xiao Wanru said coldly. After that, she stood still and bowed to Xiao Yenru and Xiao Zehuan. Then she walked forward in a hurry, leaving the two of them behind her. Xiao Yenru was stunned. She didn't expect that Xiao Wanru would not give her face. Xiao Zaihuan raised the corner of her mouth mockingly and said, "Big sister, I also have something to do. I just entered the Imperial Palace today. I'm really tired, so I won't accompany you anymore." After saying that, she quickened her steps and walked forward. Xiao Yenru was left behind alone. Seeing that the two people in front of her had left her behind, Xiao Yenru was so angry that her face turned pale and she almost couldn't control herself. She took a deep breath and calmed down. She looked around and found that some people had noticed the situation on their side and began to point at them quietly and talk. Xiao Yenru glanced at those misses gracefully and walked inside with a tranquil smile, as if they had not quarreled with each other just now, but Xiao Wanru and Xiao Zaihuan really had something urgent to do. Xiao Zaihuan caught up with Xiao Wanru in a few steps and said with a smile, "Fifth sister, let's go together." "Where's big sister?" Xiao Wanru said calmly. A girl like big sister has always been dignified and decent. How can she walk as fast as us? Xiao Zaihuan raised the corner of her mouth and said meaningfully. Xiao Wanru understood. "Fifth sister, how is the scenery outside? I actually wanted to go out for a walk just now, but fourth sister was going to leave, so I didn't have time." Xiao Zaihuan and Xiao Wanru walked side by side and asked curiously, "Isn't it beautiful?" Xiao Wanru thought for a moment and said, "In fact, it's nearby. I don't dare to go far. I only see a few rockery and a few pavilions on the side. I don't dare to go further." What she said sounded true. No one was stupid. They all knew that they couldn't go anywhere in the Imperial Palace. "Fifth sister, why do you have such a good relationship with Miss Zhang? When did you know Miss Zhang? Why didn't I know?" Xiao Zaihuan changed the topic to Zhang Qilan. "When I was in the Yuhui Nunnery, Miss Zhang also lived in the Yuhui Nunnery for a period of time." Xiao Wanru didn't hide it. This kind of thing couldn't be hidden, and there was no need to hide it. "It turns out that you and Miss Zhang have such a fate. It's really an accident." Xiao Zaihuan smiled kindly. She reached into her sleeve and took out a small protective talisman. She handed it to Xiao Wanru and said, "Fifth sister, this is the protective talisman I just got. It's for you." "Protective talisman? Just got it?" Xiao Wanru took it in surprise. It was a small protective talisman, and it was an exquisite protective talisman. The bag on the outside was more exquisite than she had seen before. She had seen the protective talismans of the Yuhui Nunnery and the Huaguang Temple, but she had never seen one in such an exquisite bag. This was no longer an ordinary protective talisman. The patterns drawn on it were exquisite, and it was more beautiful than the protective talismans she had seen before. "Yes, I just got it. I got one for you and one for myself." Xiao Caihuan looked around and said in a low voice. "Did you get it in the Imperial Palace?" Xiao Wanru's heart skipped a beat and she asked. "I got it in the Imperial Palace from a nanny in charge here." Xiao Caihuan said more and more carefully. How could a nanny in charge in the Imperial Palace have such a protective talisman? What does it mean by asking for it? Xiao Wanru suddenly had a strange feeling. Could the so-called protective talisman mean what she thought? "There is a Buddha hall in the Imperial Palace. Do you know that? I asked the nanny in charge to ask for it from that Buddha hall. Of course, I also paid a lot of money for it." Xiao Caihuan said with a little complacency, "Take it back and hang it around your neck and put it in your underwear. I heard that it works very well." That was to say, the nanny in charge took money from the beauties and then went to ask for this annoying protective talisman to deceive these beauties. Xiao Wanru turned the protective talisman in her hand speechlessly and asked, "Do other beauties know about it?" "There shouldn't be many people who know about it. I also learned about it by chance." Xiao Caihuan shook her head affirmatively and said, "Hide it carefully when you go back. Don't let anyone see it, especially our big sister. Maybe she will make trouble based on this." Xiao Yanru had an excellent reputation outside, but none of her sisters in the mansion really thought that she was good. "Thank you, third sister." Xiao Wanru put the protective talisman into her sleeve and thanked her. She could be sure that there were many beauties who had bought this so-called protective talisman. In her last life, she had found that the nanny in charge of Chushio Palace accepted money from the beauties and secretly helped them do things. It even involved someone secretly killing other beauties. The so-called protective talisman naturally had another meaning, which was to collect money. But she didn't know if there was anything wrong with this protective talisman. The Buddha incense on it was faint. It had indeed been worshipped in front of the Buddha. But it was just worshipped. Xiao Wanru also smelled another smell under the Buddha incense, which was very faint and almost invisible. She was not even sure if she had smelled it. While talking, the two of them arrived at the place. Everyone was tired, so they didn't say much and went into their rooms. Yujie had been waiting inside for a long time. Hearing Xiao Wanru's voice, she came out of the room early. Seeing Xiao Wanru standing in front of her, she breathed a sigh of relief. She still lived in the room at the edge, but Xiao Kaling's room on the other side of her was empty. "Smell it. Is there any smell on it?" Xiao Wanru took out the protective talisman from her sleeve and handed it to Yujie. Yujie took it, frowned and thought for a while, and then nodded affirmatively. "Miss, there is the smell of Buddhist incense in it, but there is also another kind of medicine that is too calming. If you smell it too much, your reaction will be so slow." "Miss, where did you get it?" Yujie took it and said, "Miss, there is the smell of Buddhist incense in it. Third sister gave it to me." Xiao Wanru sat down in the chair and said lightly, "Does it just slow people's reaction? If it was only this, there was nothing to be afraid of. Moreover, it would last for a long time. From this point of view, even if people found that there was another medicine, they wouldn't feel anything, especially when it was mixed with the Buddha incense which had the same effect. It's not only slow people's reaction. If it is triggered by another medicine, it may even cause a bad disease." Yujie sniffed it again and said, "What kind of bad disease?" Xiao Wanru's heart skipped a beat, and her watery eyes were deep. She had guessed so before, but she was not as sure as Yujie. It should be a kind of bad disease on the skin. When it is serious, it will cause the skin to ulcerate greatly. I have been with Mingqiu Nun since I was a child. This thing happened to Mingqiu Nun a few years ago. Miss, do you still remember the story that Mingqiu Nun told you about causing a skin disease and ruining a miss's face? Yujie asked in reply. Yujie had experienced this story personally, while Xiao Wanru had heard it from Mingqiu Nun. Mingqiu Nun had even specially written it down. The reason why Mingqiu Nun paid so much attention to it was that she thought the powder was too mysterious and didn't seem to be from the Central Plains. Chapter 739. Xiao Wanru's heart skipped a beat, and she immediately remembered the past that Mingqiu Nun had told her. Because she had only heard about it, It was not as clear as Yujia's face, so she didn't remember it before. It was not from the Central Plains, so she felt that the smell was a little strange, but she didn't know what kind of medicinal powder it was. She had come into contact with a lot of medicinal materials in the past, but she had never smelled such powder. It could be seen that it was rare. Is it the evil disease caused by the incense? Reminded by Yujia, Xiao Wanru immediately remembered it and her face changed slightly. Yes, it's the one with the incense, Yujia said with a serious face. The room fell silent. Compared with other ways to cause the disease, the incense was more difficult to guard against. Xiao Wanru's eyes fell on a copper censer on the table by the window. There was incense in the censer, and the faint fragrance coming from the mouth of the censer was refreshing and refreshing. This kind of incense should also work. Xiao Wanru asked slowly. Yujia nodded with a pale face and asked, "Miss, what should we do now?" "Put away the protective talisman and put it in." Xiao Wanru thought for a moment. "Miss, can I bury the protective talisman?" Yujia's eyes lit up. Since the protective talisman was not good, burying it was the best way. Xiao Wanru shook her head and said, "Don't bury it." She remembered what had happened to Madame of Duke Xing before. At that time, Nanny Xing had buried the piece of oiled paper in the soil. In fact, it was easy for people to find something in the newly dug soil, especially in a place like Chuxiu Palace. There was no one in the past, but now there were so many people. If someone found the newly buried traces, they would definitely feel that something was wrong. At that time, it would be easy for them to find out that she was the culprit. Things in the Imperial Palace would cause great waves even if there was no wind, not to mention that there was wind. Xiao Wanru could be sure that at that time, it would not only be her protective talisman, but also endless disasters would be caused. But it was not appropriate to put it in her place. "Don't bury it. It's not appropriate to put it here. If someone really tampered with the incense, Miss will be in trouble," Yujia said anxiously. Although Miss had just gotten the protective talisman and it would not be a big problem even if someone burned the incense, she did not dare to take the risk. She had seen with her own eyes that Miss, who had a malignant disease because of the incense, had no good part of her body. There were black bubbles all over her body. Later, even if Mingqiu Nun cured her, she was covered with scars. Her face was ruined. "Go get a purse," Xiao Wanru ordered. Yujia nodded and got up to look for the pouch and the packages they brought. After a while, she came out with a pouch. Xiao Wanru put the protective talisman in it, thought for a while and asked, "Did you bring the mint?" "Yes, this servant will go and release it immediately." Yujia was stunned at first, and then she was overjoyed. She hurriedly turned around and went into the inner room to take out some peppermint. When the two of them entered the palace, they had also prepared some common medicines. The two of them had prepared the peppermint a long time ago. "Miss, if you hadn't mentioned it, I wouldn't have remembered it." Yujia covered the protective talisman with the peppermint, tightened the opening of the purse, and tied it up hard. After the medicine on the protective talisman was mixed with a special fragrance, it would cause pores to appear on the body of the person who smelled it, and the pores would break and fester. Neither of them knew how many of these symptoms would be caused, but no matter what, neither of them dared to try it. They could neither throw it away nor bury it. Suppressing it with peppermint was the best way. When Mingqiu Nun treated that young lady, peppermint was the main medicine she used. After that, Mingqiu Nun also said in a chat that peppermint could suppress this fragrance and make it fresh. Mingqiu Nun just mentioned it casually, and this was the reason why Yujia didn't think of it just now. At this moment, she was secretly glad that both of them had brought the peppermint in. Otherwise, where could they find this kind of peppermint? She hung the purse outside the back window. This was the last room inside, so she was not afraid that people would turn over there. There was only a small partition next to it, so it was impossible for anyone to find it. After closing the window here, the two of them calmed down. Xiao Wanru sat down again, and Yujia served tea. After putting down the tea, Yujia stood beside Xiao Wanru and asked in confusion, "Miss, this protective talisman was given to you by the third Mississippi. Could it be that the third Miss wants to hurt you?" "It shouldn't be her. Even if she hurts me, she can't get any benefits." Xiao Wanru shook her head and said. She was not sure that Xiao Zaihuan would not hurt her, but she felt that Xiao Zaihuan had nothing to do with her. Even if something happened to her, Xiao Zaihuan would not get any benefits. Even if she wanted to block Xiao Zaihuan, she could not block Xiao Zaihuan's way. But it was given to you by the third miss. Yu Jie said in confusion. Xiao Wanru fell silent for a moment. She really didn't believe that Xiao Zaihuan would hurt her now. She narrowed her watery eyes slightly and thought that the Imperial Palace was really a dangerous place. It was only the first day, but she had already dug a pit for herself. She didn't even know who had secretly hurt her. However, the Buddhist incense reminded her of a person. Even though this person seemed to have no malice towards her, she couldn't resist the malice of the people around her. The dinner consisted of 4 dishes and 1 soup, which was not bad. After dinner, a eunuch brought a few pots of hot water for her to take a bath. After washing up, it was completely dark outside. The master and the servant were also tired after a day, so they went to bed early. The light in Xiao Zaihuan's room was also extinguished soon after. Obviously, she had fallen asleep. Xiao Yinru sat under the lamp, but didn't sleep. She held a letter in her hand with a slight smile on her lips. She had just received the letter and read it several times. After reading it, she picked up the letter, lit it on the lamp, and then watched it burn into ashes. First miss, could it be fake? Shuqi said hesitantly while cleaning up the ashes. The letter was picked up by a little palace made just now. It's true. Xiao Yinru said with certainty and said with an increasingly complacent smile. She had always been worried about Xiao Wanru's appearance, but she was not worried at the moment. Unexpectedly, someone had planned for her before she made any arrangements, which saved her a lot of trouble. In this draft, Xiao Yinru regarded Xiao Wanru as her biggest opponent. But, this is the Imperial Palace. Shuqi was a little worried and reminded her carefully. It's the Imperial Palace, so what? It's better to be here. Even Great Elder Princess can't intervene. Xiao Yinru snorted coldly. But Shuqi still wanted to say something but was interrupted by Xiao Yinru rudely. Since it's not our idea, it will naturally not be caused by me in the future. No matter what happens to Xiao Wanru, it has nothing to do with me. Be careful not to give yourself away. Her cold eyes fell on Shuqi, which scared Shuqi so much that she hurriedly shrank her neck and did not dare to say anything more. Compared with the past, Xiao Yinru's temper was much more violent. At the beginning, Shuqi had suggested to Xiao Yinru, and Xiao Yinru had listened to her. Now Xiao Yinru basically acted arbitrarily and became more and more irritable in private. If Shuqi hadn't served Xiao Yinru all the time, she would almost think that Xiao Yinru had changed into another person. Shuqi felt that Xiao Yinru's temper was really very mild at the beginning. She would not get angry no matter what and could control her emotions very well. The first day after entering the Imperial Palace passed quietly. Early the next morning, the eunuchs sent breakfast to the doors of the misses who stayed behind on time. After breakfast, they gathered again. This morning, they learned the rules of the Imperial Palace from the nanny in charge. This was a very painful thing for the misses who had not learned it or had not learned it properly. If they made a slight mistake, they would be scolded by the nanny in charge in front of everyone. However, those who had not learned the rules and etiquette of the Imperial Palace were often some misses who were not valued or powerful enough. Most of the misses had learned it, but they had not learned it to a standard. Xiao Ruru, Xiao Yenru, and the misses of several powerful ministers had learned it very simply. In the end, because they had nothing to do, they sat on the side and watched the nannies in charge scold those misses who had not learned it well and had to learn it again while chatting. Zhang Qilan ran to Xiao Wanru's side again. The two of them found a place and sat down to chat. "Fifth miss, do you have this?" Zhang Qilan asked softly. Seeing that no one was paying attention to them, she pulled out a piece of thread from her sleeve. The familiar thread happened to be the one she had seen yesterday. She nodded slightly and said, "Third sister gave me one. I thought you didn't have it, so I wanted to buy one for you. Since you have it, forget it." Zhang Qilan lowered her head and carefully stuffed the thread into her sleeve. She looked around for fear of being discovered. "Did you get it from the nanny in charge?" Xiao Wanru asked. Yes, I specially inquired about it. It should be bought for my father's sake. However, your Duke Xing's mansion also has power, so those people should also give it to you for the sake of your mansion. Zhang Qilan squinted at the few nannies standing in the middle. Seeing that they did not notice them, she leaned over and whispered. Where did they come from? Xiao Wanru heard something and asked calmly. There is a Buddha hall in the Imperial Palace. Do you know? Zhang Qilan asked. Xiao Wanru nodded. Including yesterday, this was the second person to ask her this question. I heard that the Buddha hall in the Imperial Palace is getting more and more effective now. I don't know who first went there to ask for a protective talisman. Later, it was said that it was quite effective. It's just that it's not easy to get a protective talisman in the Imperial Palace, so this protective talisman has become more and more precious. Zhang Qilan curled her lips and said, I actually don't believe it. There was no such protective talisman before? Xiao Wanru's heart skipped a beat, and there were some ripples in her watery eyes. I've never heard of it before, but this time I heard of it, and it's very prosperous. Zhang Qilan said indifferently. Chapter 740. Where did it come from? Xiao Wanru asked. I don't know where it came from. Anyway, it's very effective, especially for women, Zhang Qilan said and looked around. Zhang Qilan said as she looked around. Seeing that no one was paying attention to them, she whispered in her ear, It is said that those who live in the palace are all nobles. They all have good lives. If they can get the protective talisman from the palace, they can become nobles or be protected by the nobles in the palace. Xiao Wanru looked at Zhang Qilan in shock. Yes, that's what it said, but it's also a legend. I don't know if it's accurate. Zhang Qilan nodded. She was afraid that Xiao Wanru wouldn't believe it, so she said affirmatively again. Xiao Wanru was silent for a moment and suddenly understood. There was such a saying about the protective talisman. No wonder these beauties in the talent show would try so hard to get one. Then, where did these protective talismans come from? Xiao Wanru asked in another way. The Buddha hall. Zhang Qilan said in confusion. She remembered that Xiao Wanru had asked about it just now. Who is in charge of the Buddha hall? Xiao Wanru raised her eyebrows. Pushun Nun. Weren't you in the Yuhui nunnery before? Don't you know that Pushun Nun of the Yuhui nunnery entered the palace to preach for the Empress Dowager and temporarily lived in the Buddha hall? There were a few nuns in the Buddha hall before, but they were obviously not as powerful as Pushun Nun. Zhang Qilan really knew about this, and she thought that Xiao Wanru should also know about it. Wasn't she living in the Yuhui nunnery at that time? Pushun Nun? Xiao Wanru's heart skipped a beat, and a trace of darkness flashed in the corner of her eyes. She continued to ask, should Pushun Nun's 2 disciples also be in the palace? Of course. How can a person like Pushun Nun not have someone to serve her? In fact, even if she doesn't bring 2 disciples here, there are also nuns serving her in the Buddha hall in the palace. Zhang Qilan looked at Xiao Wanru in confusion and asked, Fifth Miss, do you know something? I'm just wondering why Pushun Nun, such a good person, would accept 2 mediocre disciples. Xiao Wanru changed the topic and quietly changed the topic. Are you serious? Her disciple isn't that good? Zhang Qilan asked with her eyes wide open. Do you still remember the nun who made things difficult for me when we first met? Isn't she one of the 2 disciples of Pushun Nun? Xiao Wanru reminded her with a smile. As soon as she said this, Zhang Qilan immediately remembered and was stunned. After a long time she said, That's really nothing. He's actually the disciple of Pushun Nun. How did Pushun Nun accept such a disciple? Didn't she send him away early? Although she had also experienced that incident back then, she did not notice these things. The 2 of them talked softly, and they were very comfortable. Some of the young ladies who had learned the rules did not learn it well, and were scolded by the supervisor nanny. At this time, they started to sob, which was really pitiful, and slowed down the progress. The 2 of them were talking congenially. On the other side, Xiao Yinru was also talking intimately with a Mississippi. From time to time, she looked up at Zhang Qilan and Xiao Wanru. If Zhang Qilan or Xiao Wanru met her eyes, she would smile slightly, friendly and gentle. The last time in the morning was to draw lots, and it was time for painting. The morning passed quickly. When it was lunchtime, they went back for lunch. Xiao Wanru had just finished lunch when she heard a knock at the door. She asked Yujie to open the door and saw Xiao Yanru standing at the door with a smile. "Big sister." Xiao Wanru stood up. Xiao Yanru nodded and walked in. "Please sit down." Xiao Wanru pointed to the chair beside her and said. Xiao Yanru sat down with a smile. Yujie quickly cleaned up the table and served 2 cups of tea. Then she retreated behind her master like Shuchi. "Fifth sister, I came here today because I have something to say," Xiao Yanru said gently. Xiao Wanru did not answer. She lowered her head, picked up the teacup, took 2 sips, and then slowly put it down. With a distant smile on her face, she looked at Xiao Yanru and waited for her to continue. She didn't think there was anything between them that needed to be discussed in private. Why did Xiao Yanru come here today? "Fifth sister, do you know that Pushun Nun is in the Imperial Palace?" Xiao Yanru said cheerfully with a face full of joy. Xiao Wanru nodded, narrowed her eyes, observed Xiao Yanru's expression, and waited for her to say something. "When I went to the Yuhui nunnery to cultivate in seclusion, I wanted to learn painting from Pushun Nun. But later I had to go down the mountain for something, so I didn't have a chance to learn painting again. Now I'm in the Imperial Palace, and it happens that we have nothing to do in the afternoon. I wonder if you can accompany me there. If I go alone, I'm afraid that it will cause a misunderstanding." Xiao Wanru lowered her head. She knew what Xiao Yanru was worried about. If she kept wandering outside, others would mistakenly think that she deliberately wanted to seduce someone. In the Imperial Palace, there were only a few princes and it was not good to guess anyone's intention. "Why don't you go to third sister?" Xiao Wanru looked at her and asked without refusing or agreeing immediately. Third sister didn't like Pushun Nun very much at that time. If I let her go, she will definitely be in a bad mood and even deliberately find something to talk about. Xiao Yanru shook her head and said bluntly. "Third sister has always been magnanimous. Why do you have a problem with Pushun Nun? Besides, Pushun Nun is your painting master. Why doesn't third sister like her?" Xiao Wanru looked at Xiao Yanru and said. Xiao Yanru couldn't answer this question for a while. After being silent for a while, she shook her hand and said with a wry smile, "This is third sister's private matter. Maybe we don't get along well. Some things are related to painting." Third sister went up the mountain to ask to marry Pushun Nun, but Pushun Nun didn't agree. In fact, this kind of thing is not a big deal. Her words were very vague, but because this matter was related to Xiao Caihuan, it was reasonable for her to say so. "Fifth sister, this time we go to the Imperial Palace. Grandma and father mean that one of our people should go to Prince Yu's mansion or Prince Zhou's mansion. But no matter who goes and what the position is, it's not up to us to decide. I hope that during this period of time, the 3 of us can get rid of the past bad things and stand on the same side. We are all sisters, and it's easy to be connected if something happens in the Imperial Palace." Xiao Yanru said with a serious face. What she said was extremely reasonable. Even if they fought fiercely outside, they should work together in the Imperial Palace at this time. Otherwise, it was hard to say who would be implicated. Xiao Wanru fell silent for a moment and looked a little hesitant. Others didn't know the resentment between them, but they knew it clearly. What's more, Xiao Yanru's words implied the expectation of Duke Xing's mansion. This expectation was also known in the mansion. Xiao Yanru didn't lie about this, but the meaning in it was slightly different. Duke Xing's mansion did hope that a miss would be selected, but the candidate was Xiao Yanru. In a sentence, 70% was true and 30% was false, which was the most difficult to distinguish. Xiao Wanru thought for a moment and said, "Big sister, I'm afraid I can't go with you. The lot I drew before is in the front." "Whose lot did you draw?" Xiao Yanru asked. At that time, everyone drew lots and left, and the 2 of them didn't go together. Until now, Xiao Yanru didn't know how Xiao Wanru's lot was. "I drew 2-2, and it's coming soon. There's only 1 miss in front." "That's a coincidence. I drew 3-2, and both of them drew 2. I'm not in a hurry. I heard that the painters don't paint fast, and it will take at least 2 or 3 days for a miss to paint. Let's go in a while, okay?" Xiao Yanru said with a smile and didn't take it seriously. Although a miss can paint a lot, I heard that if there is any accident, the miss in the back will take the place. If she wants to find us, but we are not there, it will not be good. Xiao Wanru shook her head and refused. Seeing Xiao Wanfa refuse repeatedly, Xiao Yanru sighed helplessly. Since fifth sister said so, I'll go alone. I just hope that if someone asks, "Fifth sister, you can explain it for me." Xiao Yanru stood up and said. How should I explain it? Xiao Wanru also stood up. Well, just say that I'm going to find Pushan Nun. Xiao Yanru hesitated for a moment and said. Okay. Xiao Wanru nodded. No matter what happened between them outside the Imperial Palace, Xiao Yanru's request was reasonable. Moreover, Xiao Yanru had refused to go with her. It was not a big deal for her to explain for her. Even if it was to make up for her previous refusal, she should agree at this time. Thank you, fifth sister. Xiao Yanru bowed sideways to her, turned around and walked out, followed closely by Shuqi. When she reached the door, Xiao Yanru seemed to think of something, suddenly stopped, turned around, and said, Fifth sister, I had an appointment with Miss Wang in the afternoon. If Miss Wang comes later, please help me greet her. Miss Wang? Xiao Wanru didn't understand who she was referring to at the moment. It's the Miss Wang who talked to me in the morning. We had a good talk in the morning, just like you and Miss Zhang. We also made an appointment in the afternoon. Now I suddenly want to find Pushan Nun. I'm afraid that I will delay Miss Wang. Xiao Yanru said modestly. I got it. Xiao Wanru nodded and said. It was a piece of cake. Just like explaining Xiao Yanru's whereabouts before, it was not a big deal and anyone would agree to do it. Xiao Yanru bowed sideways to Xiao Wanru with a smile and then left with Shuqi. After they went out of the door, Yu Jie frowned and said, Miss, why do I feel that something is wrong? What on earth did first Miss come here for? She said a lot and entrusted a lot of things to Xiao Yanru. She looked very sincere, as if she had told everything about Duke Xing's mansion clearly. It could be said that she had confided in Duke Xing's mansion. However, when she thought about it again, she felt that Xiao Yanru was too cautious to make a special trip for such a trivial matter. Xiao Wanru smiled slightly and said with a faint look in her eyes. She made such a big fuss for only one purpose, for Miss Wang. Chapter 741. Miss Wang, formerly known as Wang Yusen, was the second daughter of the left assistant minister of the Ministry of Works. In fact, Xiao Wanru didn't know her. When Xiao Yanru was talking with this miss just now, she just glanced at her. Xiao Yanru happened to stand in front of Miss Wang Yusen, so Xiao Wanru didn't see Miss Wang's appearance clearly. Originally, she didn't expect that Miss Wang was Wang Yusen. However, Xiao Yanru's topic just now didn't seem to focus on this. In the end, she just mentioned this person as if she had just thought of this person. It was absolutely impossible for Xiao Wanru to accompany her to see Pushan Nun. Not to mention that Xiao Wanru didn't have any contact with Pushan Nun, and she had become enemies with Pushan Nun's two disciples. Given her relationship with Xiao Yanru, it was impossible for her to rashly accompany Xiao Yanru to see Pushan Nun in such a place. In the Imperial Palace, one wrong word or one wrong step could lead to eternal damnation. If it were other sisters who didn't get along well with each other, they wouldn't agree to go. Xiao Yanru's request was as good as not saying anything. As for explaining for Xiao Yanru, it was a trivial matter. Compared with the previous things, Xiao Wanru would definitely agree to such an insignificant thing. It seemed that this was the key to Xiao Yanru's visit this time, but in fact, the last one, which she almost forgot, was the key. Wang Yusen, Miss Wang, concubine Wang, a hot-tempered and jealous concubine Wang. Concubine Wang was indeed Xiao Yanru's friend in the last life, and they had always been on good terms. When Xiao Yanru was Xiao Jiaoyi, concubine Wang had always been attached to her, making sarcastic remarks and helping Xiao Yanru torture her. Sometimes when Xiao Yanru pretended to be dignified and gentle, concubine Wang would be a vicious helper beside her. However, concubine Wang died in an inexplicable manner. For some unknown reason, she jumped into a lake in the middle of winter and drowned. At that time, Xiao Wanru saw this scene with her own eyes, so she remembered it very clearly. The lake that concubine Wang jumped into was not far from Chuxiu Palace. Standing at the back window of the attic that Chu Luqian had prepared for her, she could see it from a distance. Coincidentally, she was standing at the back window that day. She saw concubine Wang running over and jumping into the water. It was winter, so the palace maids and eunuchs who chased after her didn't dare to go down the mountain. Only a few loyal ones jumped into the water. By the time the emperor got the news and came over, concubine Wang was already dead. Xiao Wanru remembered that she was very happy to see it at that time. It seemed that she had been secretly pricked by concubine Wang with a needle the day before, and her wrist was so swollen that she could not even hold a paintbrush. "Is there something wrong with Miss Wang?" Yu Jie said worriedly. "Since there's a problem, why did Miss agree to first Mrs. request? She could have just declined it." "Don't refuse. I'd like to see what Miss Wang and Xiao Yanru want to do this time," Xiao Wanru said with a low smile and a cold look in her eyes. She was not the lonely and helpless painter in her last life, and the two of them were not the emperors as yet. In terms of status, her current status was still higher than Miss Wang Yusin's, so she was not afraid to meet Miss Wang again. When Miss Wang Yusin came, Xiao Wanru was talking in Xiao Zaihuan's room. Hearing Xiao Yanru's knock on the door, Xiao Zaihuan asked her maid to go over and have a look, and then brought Wang Yusin over. Wang Yusin, who was dressed in a light yellow palace dress, was also very beautiful. In terms of appearance, she even looked very kind and sweet. She didn't look as mean and vicious as Xiao Yanru's hatchet man in her last life. "Third Miss Xiao, fifth Miss Xiao." After bowing to the two sisters, she stood up with a smile and introduced her name and origin. "Miss Wang, please sit down." Xiao Zaihuan, who was the host here, politely invited her to take a seat with a smile. Xiao Wanru smiled slightly and didn't answer. She just looked Miss Wang up and down, as if it was the first time she had seen her. In fact, it was the first time she had seen her. It was 3 years later when she saw her in her last life. When Wang Yusin, who had become and met her, she was more arrogant and domineering. But at present, Miss Wang couldn't be arrogant. The three of them talked and laughed harmoniously, although Wang Yusin and Xiao Zaihuan were talking most of the time. Xiao Wanru looked at them with a smile, and from time to time, she couldn't help responding and occasionally drinking tea. "Fifth Miss Xiao, do you want to stay or leave?" Suddenly, Wang Yusin brought the topic to Xiao Wanru with a smile and looked at Xiao Wanru kindly. It's not up to us to decide." Xiao Wanru smiled slightly and said leisurely. She sat in the back seat and didn't seem to like talking much, which would make people feel inattentive. However, such a beautiful appearance was a taboo no matter where she was. Thinking of what Xiao Yanru had said to her before, the corner of Wang Yusin's eyes twitched fiercely. Xiao Yanru was the most taboo for her. Before entering the Imperial Palace, she knew that Xiao Yanru was the first beauty, and such a reputation must be her strongest opponent. Unexpectedly, she not only saw Xiao Yanru, but also saw Xiao Wanru, who was more outstanding. Compared with Xiao Yanru, who seemed to be gentle and magnanimous, Xiao Wanru in front of her was her ultimate opponent. "I heard that you know Prince Yu, fifth miss?" Wang Yusin pretended to be indifferent and said. Even Xiao Zaihuan looked at Xiao Wanru. She really didn't know about it. "Prince Yu?" Xiao Wanru frowned and shook her head. "I've only seen him once from a distance." "You've only met him once?" "I heard that Prince Xian and Prince Yu met you together, and Prince Xian even came to Duke Xing's mansion to see you?" Wang Yusin said with a surprised look. Xiao Zaihuan looked at Xiao Wanru with a little suspicion. She seemed to have heard this from someone in the mansion, but she didn't know whether it was true or not. Now it seemed that it was true. Xiao Wanru's face darkened. She raised her watery eyes, and her cold eyes fell on Wang Yusin. "Miss Wang, what do you mean? Do you know that the last thing we can't do in the Imperial Palace is talk? If you want to know whether what I said is true or not, then let's go to see the Empress now and ask her to invite Prince Xian and Prince Yu here and ask them face to face. It's better than this kind of suspicion that will ruin our reputation in private." Xiao Wanru said and stood up, as if she was going to confront them face to face. Wang Yusin was stunned at first, and then her face turned red, and her hands and feet couldn't help trembling. She didn't expect that a simple test would make Xiao Wanru say such a thing. But if it really went to the Empress, she would definitely be in trouble. For a moment, she was angry and resentful, and regretted that she had spoken too quickly. When Xiao Yinru told her, she repeatedly said that she couldn't talk about this kind of thing, but when she saw Xiao Yinru sitting on the side looking very kind, she couldn't help asking. "Fifth miss, it's just some rumors I heard. You can't take them seriously. Why bother the Empress?" Although Wang Yusin was angry, she had to admit her mistake. She had just arrived at the palace for the consort selection, and she had already gotten into a quarrel. Furthermore, she had indeed overheard it. If the Empress found out, she would immediately be sent back. She was not young anymore. She had stayed until now and had not gotten married just for this consort selection. She could not return. "It's good that you think so, Miss Wang. I don't mind, but I'm afraid that Prince Xian and Prince Yu will investigate it. Although this is Chuxiu Palace, which is a little remote, it is still in the palace. If the two princes investigate it, I'm afraid that even your father will have to bear the consequences, not to mention Miss Wang." Xiao Wanru said lightly, turned to Xiao Caihuan and said, "Third sister, I'm a little uncomfortable, so I can't accompany you anymore. Since you're not feeling well, go back." Xiao Caihuan nodded. Watching Xiao Wanru leave, Wang Yusin was ashamed and annoyed, and almost crushed the handkerchief in her hand. She didn't expect that Xiao Wanru, who seemed to be easy to bully, was so difficult to deal with. She was confused by Xiao Wanru before and accidentally said what was in her mind. "Third miss, I'm leaving too. I've been out for so long and it's time to go back." Wang Yusin stood up with a dry smile. Xiao Caihuan also stood up and said, "Then I'll see you off, Miss Wang." "You're welcome, Third Mississippi. I won't bother you anymore." Wang Yusin was really not in the mood, so she pulled her handkerchief and refused. She was full of anger now, so she was not in the mood to deal with Xiao Caihuan. After saying this, she turned around and walked out without waiting for Xiao Caihuan to say anything. When she got out of the room and saw Xiao Wanru's back, she glared at her for a few times and then left with anger in her heart. Originally, she came to see Xiao Wanru first. After all, Xiao Wanru's appearance gave her a great sense of crisis. Now it seemed that it was true. Xiao Wanru really had a special relationship with Prince Yu. Otherwise, she wouldn't have dared to ask the Empress to invite Prince Yu to confront her face to face. Was she sure that Prince Yu would prove her words? Prince Yu and Xiao Wanru had known each other for a long time. This time, it was very likely that Xiao Wanru would be chosen as the princess, so she couldn't calm down. She and Prince Yu had also known each other for a long time, and Prince Yu had always had a good impression of her. In her words with her father before, she also meant to wait for the consort selection. But with her identity, she could only be a concubine at most. But if the princess was Xiao Wanru, she was really unwilling. She went out, turned in a direction, and went straight out of the palace gate. At this time, Prince Yu might be there. Before she entered the palace last time, Prince Yu had hinted to her. "Miss, where is your incense?" The servant girl walking behind her reminded her. After Wang Yusin stood still, she took out a small piece of incense from her sleeve and was about to throw it away. "Miss, don't throw it away. It's not good if it's seen here." The servant girl pointed to the gate of Chuxiu Palace, and a palace maid at the gate was looking at them in surprise. "Let's go. We'll talk about it later." Wang Yusin put the incense back into her sleeve and said coldly. This incense was supposed to be put in the incense burner in Xiao Wanru's room, but she didn't expect that Xiao Wanru was not in her room but in Xiao Caihuan's room. Chapter 742. Remember in 1 second, 800 !say, net wonderful pop-up window free reading. "Miss, where are we going now?" "Go find His Highness Prince Yu," Wang Yusin said angrily. She must mess up Xiao Wanru's plan. After that, she strode out. When the palace maid at the gate saw her coming, she hurriedly bowed to her. She pushed her hard and staggered to the ground. Wang Yusin was in a bad mood, so she ignored a little palace maid and walked out with her maid. She didn't notice the palace maid who had fallen to the ground behind her and was staring at her back with hatred. As a palace maid, and an outstanding one at that, although she had been living at the bottom of the palace, Han Dan had always wanted to get out of here. Apart from her birth, she didn't think she was any worse than the beauties here, especially the young lady just now. Her father was a shiotsai, but he remained a shiotsai his entire life. In the end, he was so poor that he couldn't even support himself. She was the daughter of a scholar and was very beautiful. After her father's death, she entered the palace. Having seen the glory and splendor of the royal family, even though she was just a palace maid, she had infinite ideas. She wanted to find a good master. With her good appearance and intelligence, it would be better if she had a chance to climb up. Now she had taken a fancy to the first miss and the fifth miss of Duke Xing's mansion. She felt that both of them had great prospects. As for the young lady who had rushed out with a ferocious expression, she was inferior to him. He didn't know where she got the courage to get angry in the palace. Han Dan was very annoyed, but there was nothing she could do. Originally, if there was only one choice, she would have directly pledged her loyalty and wholeheartedly assist this young lady. But now that there were two choices, she would have to wait and see. After all, she had heard that in the aristocratic families, once a young lady was chosen, the other young ladies would not be chosen. If she chose the one who was selected, there would be no hope. The first miss and the fifth miss both came from the same mansion. Between the two of them, only one could stay, even though they were the most outstanding among all the beauties. Of course, before the final candidate was decided, she would try her best to please both of them. Thinking about this, Han Dan stood up, patted the dust on her clothes, looked at Wang Yusin's back, and cursed in a low voice, "Ugly people make more trouble." Then he limped into the palace. Wang Yusin didn't know that she was now being scolded by a palace maid she despised. Of course, she didn't know that this palace maid would be her opponent in the future. Now she was full of anger provoked by Xiao Wanru and couldn't suppress it. She just wanted to complain to Chu Luiyue. After a few turns, he came to the front of a pavilion. He looked around and saw two guards standing in front of the door. He was overjoyed. His Highness Prince Yu should be there. The reason why she knew this place was that Chu Luiyue met her when he went to Chu's mansion. He inadvertently mentioned this place and said that he would enjoy the scenery here when he was free. He also told her that she could also come here to enjoy the scenery if she had nothing to do after entering the palace. In order to be afraid that she did not know the way, he specially drew a simple map from Chuxiu Palace to here. She calmed herself down and stood up to tidy her hair. She asked her maid, "Is my hair messy?" "It's not messy. Miss, you are still very beautiful." The maid looked at it and praised. These words pleased Wang Yusin. She turned around and walked to the front of the pavilion. When the two guards saw her coming, they stretched out their hands to stop her and asked coldly, "Who are you?" "I am the daughter of Vice Minister Wang. I am attending the consort selection in the palace. I want to meet His Highness Prince Yu," Wang Yusin said softly. The two guards glanced at each other, and one of them said, "Wait a minute." After that, he turned around and walked inside. The other still stood in front of Wang Yusin, not allowing her to take half a step forward at will. The guard who went in to report moved quickly. After a while, he came out and bowed respectfully to Wang Yusin. "Miss Wang, our prince invites you to come in." "Thank you," Wang Yusin said proudly. Sure enough, His Highness Prince Yu would be waiting for her here. She became more and more confident. She had always thought that she was good-looking, but when she entered the palace, she found that there were too many beauties in the consort selection. Although she was outstanding, she was not the most outstanding one. Compared with the sisters of Duke Xing's mansion, she was really not good enough. Fortunately, the first Miss Xiao said that she had no intention of being selected. The one selected from Duke Xing's mansion should be Xiao Wanru. Therefore, she had a very good attitude towards Xiao Yenru. After a while, the two of them became good sisters who talked about everything. But now, even if she was not as good-looking as Xiao Wanru, so what? Prince Yu took a fancy to her, not Xiao Wanru. In order to wait for her to come, he had been waiting here early. Xiao Wanru could not compare with such a friendship. With Prince Yu's confidence, Xiao Wanru could only dream of entering Prince Yu's mansion. Chu Luiyue stood by the window with his hands clasped behind his back, looking at the lake outside the window. The window was facing the east, and the sunlight shone in. He looked as if he was gilded, becoming taller and more handsome. The layout of the room was very simple, with only a desk and a few chairs. It was a leisure office. This was indeed the place where Chu Luiwei occasionally rested and worked. In fact, there was no such place originally, but because of the consort selection, the Empress gave Prince Yu, Prince Zhou, and Prince Xian a pavilion near Chuxiu Palace so that they could occasionally see these beauties. Under the premise of the general environment, the princes also had a certain degree of freedom to choose their own women. Of course, the position of princess was still unquestionable, but if there were really people they liked, they could also choose one or two to marry into the mansion. Of course, this had to be under the condition that it did not conflict with the position of princess. Chu Luqin originally had his own pavilion here, so the empress did not decorate it. However, Chu Luiwei felt that this place was very good. When Wang Yusen came in and saw Chu Luiwei's tall back, she immediately lowered her body shyly and bowed sideways. "Greetings, Prince Yu." "Miss Wang, please sit down." Chu Luiwei turned around. Although the smile on his face was very faint, it could be seen that it was much softer than the coldness in front of others in the past. "Thank you, Your Highness." Wang Yusen came over and sat down on a chair on one side. She lowered her head with a red face and rubbed the handkerchief in her hand uneasily, feeling excited. As expected, Prince Yu was waiting for her here, and Prince Yu spoke to her very softly. These two feelings made her very excited. "Miss Wang, what's the matter?" Chu Luiwei walked to the main seat, lifted his robe, sat down, and asked in a warm voice. Wang Yusen couldn't speak for a while, only feeling that her face was burning. All the words she had said before disappeared when she saw Chu Luiwei. Chu Luiwei frowned secretly and glanced at Wang Yusen, who seemed to want to say something. He still had something to do later, so he didn't want to waste more time on Wang Yusen. He coughed in a low voice and started the topic. "Miss Wang, how are you living in the palace? If you feel uncomfortable, tell me, and I will do my best for you." In fact, these words were ambiguous. Chu Luiwei took a fancy to Assistant Minister Wang's strength. Assistant Minister Wang's rank was not very high, but the Wang family was an aristocratic family, and Assistant Minister Wang was not the only official in the family. On the surface, it seemed that Assistant Minister Wang's rank was not high, which ruled out the possibility of Wang Yusen being selected as a princess. With Wang Yusen's background, she could become his concubine or concubine, which was Chu Luiwei's original plan. "My place is not bad, but—" Wang Yusen said softly. "But what?" Chu Luiwei was impatient in his heart, but he didn't show it on his face. He still asked in a very gentle voice. Compared with his previous sharpness, he was almost gentle. Wang Yusen felt her heart beat faster, as if something was about to jump out of her heart. She subconsciously clenched the handkerchief in her hand and said coquettishly, "Most of the ladies are very kind and don't bully others. We live happily together." "Did someone bully you?" Chu Luiwei frowned and asked. He really didn't want to deal with this kind of thing between women. Wang Yusen, who was secretly looking at him, saw his expression. She thought that Chu Luiwei was angry because she had been bullied, so she was overjoyed. "No, no one bullied me." She raised her hand and shook her hands, denying it. But her eyes and expression showed that she had been bullied, and she didn't dare to say anything. "Tell me, who bullied you?" Chu Luiwei was not in the mood to deal with her, so he asked directly. If it was an irrelevant person, he didn't mind teaching her a lesson secretly. It's fifth Miss Xiao." Wang Yusen wiped her tears aggrievedly and wiped the non-existent tears with a handkerchief. "She is the granddaughter of and great elder princess and the lineal miss of Duke Xing's mansion." "Fifth Miss Xiao? Xiao Wanru?" A slender and delicate figure immediately jumped out of Chu Luiwei's mind. This time, he really frowned, even with some inexplicable annoyance. "Tell me what's going on. How did she bully you?" Wang Yusen had originally come to complain. Now that she had provoked Prince Yu's anger, she became more and more aggrieved. Thinking of Xiao Wanru's rebuke of her just now, she actually squeezed out a few drops of tears. Her eyes also turned red. Fifth Miss Xiao rebuked me in front of the misses of Duke Xing's mansion by virtue of her identity. She said that I couldn't be selected. Wang Yusin cried. She said that even if I could be selected in the end, she wouldn't let me have an easy time. Of course, she meant to hint to Chu Luiyue that if she entered Prince Yu's mansion, Xiao Wanru must not. Otherwise, with Xiao Wanru's character, she would definitely deal with her. If a vicious woman wanted to deal with her beloved woman, no man would let this woman have a chance to enter his mansion. Because of Chu Luiyue's gentleness, Wang Yusin had an illusion that she was the woman whom Prince Yu cared about. At this time, she consciously put herself in the shoes of Prince Yu and felt that this matter was very certain. Xiao Wanru would not be able to enter Prince Yu's mansion if she was there. Chapter 743. Why did she say that about you? Chu Liu asked. I don't know. I was talking to several Mrs. Xiao. I was talking about your highness. I said that when I saw your highness in the past, your highness was handsome, spirited, and extremely gentle, but people said that your highness was cold. In fact, I didn't say anything else, but Fifth Miss Xiao flew into a rage and repeatedly reprimanded me, saying that I shouldn't have mentioned Prince Yu. Wang Yusin looked more and more aggrieved. Of course, she meant that Xiao Wanru also wanted to marry into Prince Yu's mansion, so she showed great malice to her and acted like the future mistress of Prince Yu's mansion. Xiao Wanru was still in the consort selection, and it was hard to say whether she could be selected or not. What's more, if she could marry into Prince Yu's mansion, she could say it as a sure thing. Moreover, she directly slapped Prince Yu in the face and trampled his beloved woman under her feet, as if she would not give up until she died. No man could bear it. Although Wang Yusin looked aggrieved, she was secretly complacent. No matter how outstanding Xiao Wanru was, she spoke ill of her in front of Prince Yu first, and he would definitely hate her. So what if he saw her outstanding appearance at that time? If he hated her, he hated her. Chu Luiyue's eyebrows twitched. He picked up a cup of tea on the desk with his slender fingers and took a sip. His eyes fell slightly, concealing a trace of emotion in them. Xiao Wanru liked him and wanted to marry into his Prince Yu's mansion? With Xiao Wanru's identity, it was possible, but if she married into his Prince Yu's mansion, Xiao Yanru would not be able to marry again. Then the support of Duke Xing's mansion might be taken away by Chu Liuzhou. Of course, he didn't want such a thing to happen. In fact, the rule that two sisters could not marry into the royal family at the same time was not absolute, but it was certain that two sisters could not marry into the same prince's mansion. Moreover, most of the sisters were daughters of lineal descent, so they had their own noble identities. In comparison, Chu Luiyue still thought that Xiao Yanru had a greater chance of winning, but when he thought of Xiao Wanru, he felt that since she loved him so much, he couldn't let her go. In his heart, he was secretly thinking of a way to let these two sisters enter his prince's mansion together. That would be the best. The room became quiet, and Wang Yusin twisted her body uneasily. She had thought that Chu Luiyue would promise her that he would never let Xiao Wanru enter Prince Yu's mansion, but what did he mean now? Your Highness? Wang Yusin asked tentatively. I see. You can go back now. Pay more attention to Fifth Miss Xiao's mood in the future. If anything happens, report to me immediately. I'll make sure you're satisfied. Chu Luiyue raised his head and said in a warm voice. Thank you, Your Highness. Wang Yusin stood up excitedly and bowed deeply to Chu Luiyue. She felt relieved. In her opinion, Chu Luiyue had already made his feelings clear to her. Since he had achieved his goal, she knew that she shouldn't stay here any longer. Seeing Wang Yusin leave, Chu Luiyue frowned heavily and looked at Wang Yusin's back coldly. When he saw Xiao Wanru in the palace that day, he was more shocked than Xiao Yanru. If he had known that Xiao Wanru would make him so different, he should have taken action when he was in Jiangzhou that day instead of waiting until now. At present, he would not let go of Xiao Yanru. Fortunately, Xiao Wanru was still young, so he could let her go back and wait for a few more years. When his affairs were settled, it would not be difficult for him to let Xiao Wanru enter the palace. Even if it was against the rules, if he was in power, it would not be difficult for him to ascend to the position of Emperor Tianming. Wang Yusin walked halfway and turned around, only to see Chu Luiyue looking at her back in a daze, and reluctant to part with her. She blushed with shyness, but in her heart, she became more and more happy. Sure enough, Prince Yu was very fond of her. Chu Luiwei didn't expect that his days could make Wang Yusen imagine so many things. He took a deep breath. This time, he had to stop Xiao Wanru from being selected, especially Chu Luchen. He heard that 3 years ago, Imperial grandmother seemed to intend to marry Xiao Wanru to Chu Luchen. That invalid had been hanging in the air, but as long as he didn't die, he would be an invalid who was not easy to deal with. He must not underestimate him. In fact, he could start from Ru and Great Elder Princess. As long as Ru and Great Elder Princess understood that if she got in touch with Chu Luchen, she could only be a widow in the end. He believed that Great Elder Princess, who had just found her granddaughter, would not be happy. At that time, even the Empress would have to give Great Elder Princess face and would not force her. As for the Empress Dowager, and Great Elder Princess had her own way to explain it to her. As long as he showed a little of his strength, Great Elder Princess would know how to choose. Thinking of this, he immediately felt relaxed. This matter had been bothering him, but he didn't expect that Wang Yusen would solve the problem for him. Wang Yusen was not useless. It was also a good thing to keep her in the palace to keep an eye on Xiao Wanru. It was a pleasant surprise. "Miss, are we going to make a protective talisman?" Yu Jie looked at Xiao Wanru in surprise and asked. Xiao Wanru looked at the small red bag in her hand and said, "Yes, we'll make one ourselves. The protective talisman should always be hung around one's neck. If third sister knows that I didn't wear the one she gave me, she might be unhappy." The material was cut from a dress she had brought just now. It was sewn into a small cloth bag with 2 ropes tied to it. It looked very similar to the coat Xiao Zaihuan had given her before. The only difference was the exquisite pattern on it. Xiao Wanru closed the outer mouth of the bag with a needle and thread, and then sealed it skillfully. She was good at needlework. In her last life, she would do needlework and embroidery when she was free. "Miss, there is no protective talisman in it." Yu Jie's needlework was not as good as Xiao Wanru's, so she couldn't help her at this time, so she reminded her. The reason why the protective talisman was called a protective talisman was that there was a small paper talisman inside, and then it was sealed in the outer mouth of the bag, so that it could be kept for a longer time. You don't have to put it. It's just for the appearance. If third sister asks, you can pull it a little to show her. Xiao Wanru said and continued to seal the bag. "Miss, are you so sure that third miss will ask about this protective talisman?" Yu Jie asked in confusion. Since the protective talisman had been given away, how could it be possible that third miss would ask about it again? When she was in Jingxin Monastery, she had seen many people asking for protective talismans, but she had never heard that third miss would ask third miss to show it to see if it was lost. She will definitely ask about it and ask third miss to show it, Xiao Wanru said with a smile and a little laziness in her manner. She sealed the bag, turned to Yuji, blinked her watery eyes, and said, "You said before that you also drew a protective talisman. Now I ask you to draw a symbol on the outer mouth of the bag, okay?" The outer mouth of the bag containing the protective talisman was also different. Some of them were specially designed with marks. When Yu Jie was in Jingxin Monastery, she had really drawn it for the master of Jingxin Monastery and could draw 1 or 2 strokes according to the marks. "Miss, the drawing on the protective talisman is more exquisite. I can't draw it." However, Yu Jie felt that she couldn't draw the protective talisman before, so she shook her head. At that time, she took a few more glances at it and thought that it was really beautiful. "You just need to draw the middle one first. I'll draw the lines on the sides," Xiao Wanru said with a smile. She also took a few more glances at it at that time and could roughly draw a few lines. It was enough to have such a similar shape, but it didn't have to be exactly the same. The master and the servant worked together. In a short while, a protective talisman was completely finished. Looking at the protective talisman that was placed at the back window to dry, Yu Jie looked around with a very interesting expression. "Miss, it looks a little similar, but it's definitely not. I don't think it's very effective. If someone takes a closer look, they will definitely find something." Yu Jie tilted her head and looked at it again, feeling that it didn't look like it. As long as it looks a little similar, it's enough. If someone can find it with a closer look, then they don't have to look at it carefully. Xiao Wanru said meaningfully with a smile. She only needed it to look like it, but it didn't look like it in fact. If it was exactly the same, it would be hard to explain. But now it was just right. Sure enough, things happened very quickly. On the day Xiao Wanru was going to have the portrait, Xiao Yinru was also the second painter, but the two of them were not the same painter. Because the time was the same, the two of them went out together. Unexpectedly, they met Wang Yusen at the gate of the Imperial Palace. She seemed to have just come back from outside the Imperial Palace. When she saw the Xiao sisters, she immediately walked over. She first called them affectionately, "First Miss Xiao," and then called them extremely coldly, "Fifth Miss Xiao." Xiao Wanru was not surprised by Wang Yusen's behavior. She just raised her eyebrows and looked at her. She stopped and did not go forward. "Miss Wang, where are you from?" Xiao Yinru asked with a smile. "I just came back from outside. Come here." Wang Yusen took Xiao Yinru's hand and looked at Xiao Wanru warily. Seeing that Xiao Wanru did not come over, she rolled her eyes at her and said in a low voice, "I got two." As she said, she took out an object from her bosom and quickly stuffed it into Xiao Yinru's hand. Then she looked at Xiao Wanru and was satisfied when she saw that Xiao Wanru's attention did not seem to be on her. "This is for you," Wang Yusen said in a low voice. "You got it at a high price." "I don't want it." Xiao Yinru refused in a low voice. "How can you not want it? I got it at a high price and with great effort. There are only two of them, one for you and one for me," Wang Yusen said. She closed Xiao Yinru's hands hard and asked her to hold the object in her hands tightly. "But Xiao Yinru still looked a little hesitant. "First Miss Xiao, you don't have to be so polite." "We don't have to be so polite," Wang Yusen said with a smile. She proudly raised her eyebrows at Xiao Wanru, who was beside her, and said provocatively, "I got one for you because we get along well. I won't help others even if they kneel down and beg me." After that, she rolled her eyes at Xiao Wanru vaguely and said goodbye to Xiao Yinru with a smile. Seeing her leave, Xiao Yinru turned to look at Xiao Wanru with a smile and said softly, "Fifth sister, do you like this?" She stretched out her hand, and a delicate protective talisman lay quietly in her palm. Chapter 744. Fifth sister, this is for you. Xiao Yinru said softly while reaching out to pull out another protective talisman from around her neck. "I already have one." "I have one too." "Thank you for your kindness, big sister," Xiao Wanru said with a gentle smile. "Where did you get it, fifth miss?" Xiao Yinru asked in surprise. "Third sister gave it to me. I've worn it since a long time ago." Xiao Wanru pulled out a thread from around her neck. She didn't pull out all the protective talismans inside like Xiao Yinru did. She only exposed a little bit of the protective talisman to show that she was telling the truth, and then put it back. Although they were at the gate of the palace, they were leaning against a corner inside. When Xiao Yinru took it out just now, she deliberately moved to the inside, and Xiao Wanru also moved to the inside. If she took out the protective talisman at this time, no one would see it. After all, such behavior was a little rude. "Third sister gave it to you? Is it this one? I heard that this protective talisman is very efficacious and different from the ones outside. I got one before and wanted to get one for you." Xiao Yinru also put her protective talisman back and explained to Xiao Wanru with a smile. "Thank you for your kindness, big sister." Xiao Wanru said softly, "Big sister, I'll go there first. I heard that my painter is impatient. If I go there late, I'm afraid that he will be scolded." The beauties in the talent show didn't dare to offend the painter. If the painter didn't draw well, the loss would outweigh the gain. Actually, even if it was a painting of the same person, different painters would paint it differently. It wasn't that they were completely different, but with just a few small changes, a person with outstanding looks could become ordinary, and an ordinary person could become more lively and fresh. In her last life, Xiao Wanru had also been a painter. However, she was very timid and her paintings were very sincere. Even if someone wanted to give her some money and ask her to make them more beautiful, she did not dare to decorate them and did what she should do. For this reason, she was ridiculed by several misses from noble families and said that it was no wonder that she was driven out and that she was a useless, unlucky person. Fifth sister. Xiao Yinru actually wanted to talk to Xiao Wanru and find out if the protective talisman Xiao Wanru was wearing was the one given by Xiao Caihuan. However, Xiao Wanru turned around and left after saying that. She couldn't stop her even if she wanted to. Moreover, even if she could stop her, it would arouse Xiao Wanru's suspicion. She looked at Xiao Wanru's back with gloomy eyes. She would do it but not by herself. She couldn't make any mistake during the consort selection, so she would never do it by herself. Since there was a ready-made person beside her, why should she take the risk of being discovered and deal with Xiao Wanru by herself? Xiao Wanru was not easy to deal with. But was the protective talisman on her real? After fighting against Xiao Wanru for a few times, Xiao Yinru absolutely did not dare to underestimate Xiao Wanru. Miss, why don't we find a chance to check it next time? Seeing that she had been silent, Shuqi knew what she meant, so she suggested after thinking for a while. No need, she will be suspicious. Xiao Yinru waved her hand and walked out slowly. Xiao Wanru had always been vigilant and had been set up several times. If she asked her about the protective talisman again and again, it might backfire. At the moment, it was better not to ask. The protective talisman in her hand fell into her sleeve. It was a good protective talisman, but the two she gave Xiao Caihuan had something added. However, it was blocked by the Buddha incense. Even if Xiao Wanru knew some medicine skills, it would be useless. Moreover, the powder was not native to the Central Plains. Xiao Wanru was only a few years old, so it was impossible for her to know it. What if the protective talisman on the fifth miss is not given by the third miss? Shuqi was also very worried. Like Xiao Yinru, she always felt that Xiao Wanru would find out. Xiao Yinru narrowed her eyes and felt that what she had seen just now should be the real one. Although Xiao Wanru only took out one end, the delicate lines on it should be the lines newly designed by Pushun Nun. It was absolutely real. Thinking of this, the weight in his heart finally fell to the ground. Just take it as it is. Ask Wang Yusen to come over in the evening. Xiao Yinru said. She could be sure that most of it was true, but she was not sure about some of it. Yes, I got it. Shuqi nodded and agreed. The incense had been sent to Miss Wang, and she was waiting for Miss Wang to do it. Whether it succeeded or not, it had something to do with her master. Even if Miss Wang wanted to investigate it, she couldn't be blamed. The two of them chatted for a while, then they left as well. At the gate of the palace, a palace maid, who was sweeping, raised her head, looked in the direction in which the Xiao sisters went out, and then looked in the direction in which Wang Yusen had just gone, and lowered her head to sweep the floor again. If one looked carefully, one would find that the direction in which she swept the floor was no longer as meticulously as before. Instead, she swept forward, which was very similar to the direction in which Wang Yusen had left just now. Xiao Wanru's painter was also a female painter, an old female painter in her 40s or 50s. When she saw Xiao Wanru, her eyes were full of amazement. After looking Xiao Wanru up and down a few times, she immediately showed an appreciative look and smiled. Looking at the list in front of her, she asked, "Fifth Miss Xiao of Duke Xing's mansion?" Xiao Wanru said with a smile. She still had a good impression of the female painter in front of her. Although the female painter was not herself in the last life, she seemed to have a shadow of herself when she saw the female painter again after a lifetime. Fifth Miss Xiao is really beautiful. I thought that the first Miss Xiao was the most beautiful one, but it turns out that the fifth Miss Xiao is the most beautiful one. I don't suffer a loss. The female painter said with a smile, in a very good mood. As a painter, she had more pursuit of beauty than ordinary people. The other female painter actually drew the first Miss Xiao of Duke Xing's mansion, who was said to be the first beauty. This female painter had originally been very envious of her. She had seen the first Miss Xiao from a distance before, and she was indeed beautiful. Therefore, the other female painter proudly came to show off in front of her for a few days, and she was also depressed for a few days. Who didn't want to draw a beauty, let alone the first beauty? But now seeing Xiao Wanru, the female painter didn't feel regretful anymore. Next, it would be that person's turn to envy her. Thinking of this, the female painter's smile became more and more brilliant. In a very good mood, she asked Xiao Wenru to sit down at an angle and began to paint. Xiao Wenru sat calmly and elegantly, holding a picture album casually. This was originally her own request. If she sat still like this, she was afraid that she would fall asleep. The sunlight shone in from the window, making her feel lazy and sleepy. She was someone who had been an artist before, so of course, she knew that drawing a portrait of a showgirl didn't necessarily require her to sit in a serious manner. She could choose a suitable angle, and even if she was holding something in her hand, it was also fine. The female artist's album of paintings was very good. When the picture album was opened, the first picture attracted Xiao Wenru's attention. Originally, she just looked at it casually to kill time and didn't intend to see anything. But the picture in front of her made her heart palpitate. It was Chu Liuchen's painting. This picture album was not this female painter's but Chu Liuchen's. Before she had time to look at it carefully, she turned the pages one by one. As expected, she saw Chu Liuchen's seal of Lay Buddhist of Weiyu Pavilion, and her heart couldn't help but ripple. She blinked her watery eyes, and her long eyelashes fluttered twice to hide the shyness in her eyes. 2 lives, 2 lives. Was it him? In what way did he protect her in the last life? In this life, he appeared in her life again. Inexplicably, she felt a little sour and inexplicable softness. After her rebirth, she had always been rational and even hard-hearted. But now that she thought of him, she had a feeling that she couldn't control herself. She didn't know when he had entered her heart. What happened in her last life was just a pretext to cut open her heart. If she hadn't discovered that he was the person who taught her how to paint in her last life, the person who protected her in the palace, she might not have dared to dissect herself. At this moment, she wouldn't regret it. That sick and weak man, even if he would rule the world in the future, even if he was cold and bloodthirsty, treated her differently after all. Her only regret was that she didn't have any memories of him in her previous life. It was as if a piece of her memory had been forcefully dug out, and the part that was dug out was centered around him. As a result, some of her other memories were also unstable, and some of them were even lost along with it. Why did this happen? Her fingers ran across the picture album in front of her and lingered on a plum blossom painted by him, but her thoughts had already drifted away. Could she guess what had happened in the last life so that all the memories about Chu Liuchen became missing in her mind? All the memories about him were blurred, and she was inexplicably reborn. She had never heard of rebirth before, but she was reborn. If she hadn't experienced it herself, she would never have believed that this kind of thing had happened. 5th Miss, raise your head a little. The painter's voice came from her ear. Xiao Wenru reacted after a while and raised her head. Ah, very good. This is already very good. Very beautiful. The female painter praised. She really felt that the 5th Miss Xiao in front of her was the unique favorite of God. Her every frown and smile were extremely beautiful, like a beautiful picture, very pleasing to the eye. This miss came to participate in the talent show. If she couldn't be selected, the female painter felt that all the beauties in this circle should be selected. Xiao Wenru continued to ponder. She always felt that there was a key in it, a key that had a direct connection with her and Chu Liuchen, but she couldn't figure it out for a while. 5th Miss, that's all for today. You can go back and have a rest. The female painter put down the brush in her hand, looked at her painting, and nodded with satisfaction. Although it was only an outline, it could be seen that a beautiful girl was leaning against the wide wicker chair by the window, looking at a picture album with her head slightly tilted. She looked quiet and pitiful. It was quiet behind her. The female painter turned her head and saw that Xiao Wenru had closed her eyes and really fell asleep there. She smiled for a moment. Without waking her up, she quietly packed up her things, walked out of the studio, and said to Yu Jie, who was waiting outside, "Your miss is asleep. Go and wake her up later." Chapter 745. When Xiao Wenru came back, it was already late. She walked past Xiao Zaihuan's room and heard the sound of laughter inside. After entering the room and washing up a little, she heard Xiao Zaihuan's maid coming over to invite her over. Xiao Wanru took Yujie to Xiao Zaihuan's room. As soon as she entered the room, she found that there were quite a lot of people inside. There were 5 of them. Xiao Taihuan and Xiao Yanru were both there. Wang Yusin and the other 2 misses, who were also candidates for the consort selection in the past few days, were also here. Incense was burning in the air, the kind that Xiao Zaihuan liked to use in the past. The treatment of the beauties was quite good. There was incense distributed in the palace, and they could choose the incense they liked. Xiao Zaihuan liked this kind of incense. "Fifth sister, come here quickly." Seeing Xiao Wanru coming over, Xiao Zaihuan introduced her affectionately to the 2 young ladies who were not familiar with her. "This is my 5th sister." Then she said to Xiao Wanru with a smile, "This is Miss D, Miss Yu, and Miss Wang. You know them." "Greetings, Miss D, Miss Yu, Miss Wang." Xiao Wanru came over gracefully, bowed, and then sat down on one side. The smell of incense in the air was very strong. She came the latest, so she happened to sit next to the incense. Xiao Wanru looked up at the incense burner on the table beside her. It was the same kind of incense burner as hers. It was exquisite with the luxury of the royal family. From the nozzle on the top of the burner, a curling fragrance slowly overflowed from it. "Third sister, what incense did you use today? It smells so good," Xiao Wanru asked. She stood up and seemed to be about to lift the lid of the incense burner. "Fifth younger sister, it's just the plum blossom leaf incense that third younger sister likes. If fifth younger sister likes it, you can also pick these next time. I just don't know when fifth younger sister started to like this smell. Isn't fifth sister not very interested in these things in the past?" Xiao Yanru said with a soft smile on her side. Hearing her words, Xiao Zaihuan also smiled and reached out to pull her. "Sit down. What's wrong with you today? Why do you suddenly care about my incense? I've never seen you ask this question in the past." Xiao Wanru sat down as she was told and did not insist. She just looked at the incense burner with a smile and said, "It has never been so strong in the past. Can't you smell it?" The young ladies looked at each other and shook their heads. "Isn't it the same as before? Why is it so intense this time?" "The smell of plum is the lightest among all the incense, and it's the most pleasant. How can it be so strong? Is there something wrong with fifth Miss Nose?" Wang Yusin said with a sarcastic smile, but she was secretly vigilant in her heart. She didn't expect Xiao Wanru's nose to be so good that she could smell a much stronger smell. Maybe the misses have been in the room for a long time, so they didn't find it. If they came in like me, they would definitely smell something different. This fragrance is really strange. Xiao Wanru frowned with her beautiful willowy eyebrows and said with a strange look. Hearing this, Miss Yu stood up. "I'll try." She turned around and walked out of the door. After standing outside the door for a while, when she came back in, she also frowned. "This smell seems really not quite right. It's really fragrant." "Is that so? I'll also go out and try." Another young lady also stood up with a smile and walked out of the door. "Is it really so magical?" This time, even Xiao Zaihuan was interested. She followed the crowd out of the door. Wang Yusin's face turned livid, and her fingers trembled slightly. Xiao Yanru's face looked calm. She looked at the people coming in and out of the door with a smile and didn't blame them. She looked like a steady first miss, much more dignified and decent than those who went out. Seeing Xiao Yanru's expression, the 2 young ladies felt embarrassed. After sitting down, it was inappropriate for them to discuss what had happened just now. They were all ladies from aristocratic families and had entered the palace for the consort selection. How could they be persuaded so easily? Maybe the fragrance in the room was not so fragrant. It was the same as before, but they smelled different because of their own thoughts when they went in and out of the room just now. It was all a psychological effect. It was nothing. Besides, the incense that had been lit for a while was certainly different from the incense that had been lit for a while. It was lit just now, and it was a little faint when I came in. Now it has been lit for a while, so it's naturally much stronger. Miss Yu was the first to speak. She was the first to go out just now. At this time, when she saw Xiao Yanru's appearance, she felt deeply ashamed and felt that she was not magnanimous enough, so she quickly made up for it. Since she said so, the others also agreed. They all felt that even if the smell was too strong, it was not a big deal. Xiao Wanru came late, so the smell was naturally much stronger when she came in. Xiao Wanru ignored them. She just frowned and closed her eyes slightly, as if she was very uncomfortable, but she suppressed it. Fifth sister, what's wrong? Xiao Zaihuan finally noticed Xiao Wanru's abnormality and asked. Fifth sister, do you feel uncomfortable? Xiao Yanru also asked with concern. I feel a little uncomfortable. Xiao Wanru frowned tightly and held the handkerchief in her hand so hard that the blue veins on her hand stood out. What's wrong with you? Xiao Yanru asked hurriedly. She stood up and walked up to Xiao Wanru. I don't know. Xiao Wanru's delicate little face was wrinkled, and her face was a little pale. Do you want to call an imperial physician? Xiao Yanru asked nervously and looked a little flustered. Although she was asking Xiao Wanru, she was looking at Xiao Zaihuan. Xiao Zaihuan hesitated. They were in the palace, and they were in the consort selection. Besides, it was so late. If they really went to the nanny in charge and then went to call an imperial physician, the matter would definitely be blown up. At that time, it would be out of control. Not to mention Xiao Wanru, all of them present would be in trouble. Well, let's wait first. Maybe it's nothing. Xiao Zaihuan said hesitantly. This room was still her room. If they really made a scene, she would be the most responsible. She even blamed Wang Yusin at this time. If it weren't for Wang Yusin, the others wouldn't have come with her, and Xiao Wanru wouldn't have had an accident here. But she looks very bad. Miss Yu was a little timid. Looking at Xiao Wanru covering her chest in discomfort, she said anxiously, how about we ask the nanny in charge to come and ask her to call an imperial physician? No, if the nanny in charge comes, she will definitely scold us. If it gets worse, she may even drive all of us out of the palace. Wang Yusin shook her head repeatedly and stopped her. The ladies who stayed in the consort selection were all likely to be selected. Even though Xiao Zaihuan didn't have any idea at first, since she stayed, she felt that it was not entirely impossible for her to be selected. If she was sent out of the palace at this time, she would be laughed at and looked down upon by others in the future. Even if she couldn't marry one of the princes, she couldn't ruin her reputation. Xiao Zaihuan was not young. If she didn't get selected this time, she would definitely get engaged immediately. At this time, she couldn't afford to make any mistakes. Let's let fifth sister go back to rest first. She should be fine. What do you think, big sister? Even though Xiao Zaihuan thought so in her heart, she wouldn't take it all on herself. It was best to push it to Xiao Yanru at this time. Xiao Yanru hesitated, looking frightened and unable to make up her mind. Let's take fifth miss back to rest first. It won't be too late to call an imperial physician later if something happens. It would be best if she is fine. Miss D also said, okay, let's do that. Xiao Zaihuan, the owner of the room, made the final decision. She turned to Xiao Wanru and said, fifth sister, shall we help you to rest first? Xiao Wanru's eyes were as cold as snow. If something really happened, there was a big difference between calling an imperial physician earlier and later. All the people present were smart, but they didn't seem to understand what she meant. Some people pretended to be confused, while some people were selfish and just wanted to get away. Xiao Zaihuan used to be a generous and peaceful girl, but she didn't expect that she would be so selfish after being forced. Delusional. Originally, she thought that Xiao Zaihuan could see clearly that she stayed just to save face for Duke Xing's mansion, but she didn't expect that she would be delusional and have new expectations. She wanted to find out whether Xiao Yanru had planned to give her the protective talisman before, or whether Xiao Yanru knew something and took advantage of the situation. She raised the corners of her mouth silently with a sarcastic smile, and then raised her head weakly and said, sorry to trouble you, third sister. Don't mention it. We are sisters. Don't say it's troublesome. We're just sisters. Xiao Zaihuan came over to help her. Third miss, let me do it. Yu Jia stepped forward and helped Xiao Wanru to get up and walk to the door. Several misses walked her to the door worriedly. Big sister, third sister, please wait. I'm fine, but I feel uncomfortable all over, as if there is something wrong. I feel better when I go out. Xiao Wanru said softly to Xiao Yenru and Xiao Caihuan, who followed her with concern and anxiety. Fifth sister, if you feel uncomfortable later, you must come and tell me. No matter how late it is, I will definitely ask the nanny in charge to call an imperial physician. Xiao Yenru said with a serious face. Yes, fifth sister, you go to have a rest first. Xiao Caihuan nodded repeatedly and repeatedly told Yu Jie to pay attention to Xiao Wanru's health. If there was anything wrong, she should report it immediately. The two sisters expressed their concern in words. No matter what the other three thought, they also showed great concern at this time. After Yu Jie helped Xiao Wanru into the room, several misses returned to Xiao Caihuan's room. At this time, everyone was in no mood. Looking at the sky outside, Wang Yusin, Miss D, and Miss Yu all got up and said goodbye. Third miss. Before they left, Yu Jie came in from the door and bowed to Xiao Caihuan. Why don't you go to serve your miss? Xiao Caihuan frowned and said unhappily. Miss asked me to come and have a look. She always feels that the smell of incense in your room is very strange. Yu Jie said. Chapter 746. Hey, what are you talking about? What do you mean that the incense in third Miss Xiao's place is strange? Is there something wrong with the incense given by the Imperial Palace? Wang Yusin raised her eyebrows and scolded angrily. Your master is not feeling well at this time, and her mind is a little confused. Go back first. Xiao Yenru also looked unhappy. Although her voice was gentle, everyone could hear the impatience in her tone. Miss Wang, my master said that there might be something wrong with the incense. Why are you so nervous? Even if there is something wrong, it has nothing to do with you. It's really strange that you cover it up. Yu Jie ignored the threat in Wang Yusin's words and said. After that, she turned around and walked to the table with the incense. Xiao Yenru felt that something was wrong and hurried forward to stop her, but Yu Jie dodged her dexterously. Yu Jie walked to the desk, opened the lid of the incense burner, looked inside, and said in surprise, Third miss, you used 2 pieces of incense. No wonder the smell is so strong. My master may feel uncomfortable because of the strong incense. The incense she uses has always been weak. Yu Jie put down the lid in her hand and pointed to the incense burner. Wang Yusin's fingers trembled, and she looked panicked. You used 2 pieces of incense? Xiao Caihuan looked at her maid. The maid was so scared that she shook her hands and said, Miss, I didn't use 2 pieces of incense. I only used 1 piece of incense as usual. The amount of incense distributed was not much. Because the misses were basically not around during the day, the incense was often lit at night. The smell was fresh and natural, so many misses went to bed at night. Xiao Caihuan did the same. Why are there 2 pieces of incense? Xiao Caihuan also walked over and took a look at the incense burner. Sure enough, there were 2 pieces of incense in it. It could be seen clearly that the 2 pieces of incense were staggered, and the one on top was crooked. It seemed that it was not properly placed. Several others also came forward and looked at Xiao Caihuan's maid suspiciously after a glance. Only the maid was the one who lit the incense burner. Miss, it's not me. It's really not me. The servant girl was so scared that she knelt down with a plop and waved her hands. It was not a big deal to light 1 more piece of incense, but if 5th Miss was implicated because she was not feeling well, she would have to bear the consequences. If it's not you, who else could it be? You're the only one who touched this incense. Could it be that you want to harm our miss? Yu Jie said angrily. After speaking, she looked at Xiao Caihuan, and the suspicion in her eyes made Xiao Caihuan's heart beat fiercely. If it was really done by her maid, she, as the master, could not absolve herself from the guilt. Just now, she should have let Xiao Wanru have a look at it before leaving. At least in this way, she could dispel part of her suspicion. Tell me what's going on? Xiao Caihuan glanced at Xiao Yenru and slammed her hand on the table. She suspected Xiao Yenru. If there was one person here who definitely didn't want to make Xiao Wanru happy, it was Xiao Yenru. Miss, I really didn't do anything. The servant girl was shocked and flustered, and burst into tears. If you don't explain it to me today, you can forget about leaving the palace. No one can save you if you commit a crime in the palace. Xiao Zaihuan was really angry, and her face was as dark as water. She realized that she might have fallen into a trap. If Xiao Wanru really had an accident because of the incense she lit, then she would definitely not be able to escape. I put a piece of incense when I lit it. I remember it clearly. The servant girl burst into tears. She did remember it clearly. There were only a few pieces of incense in total, and they were brought here before. How could there be 2 pieces of incense? However, she did touch the incense burner, and no one had touched it. Thinking of this, the servant girl suddenly remembered something. She wiped away her tears, pointed to a servant girl hiding behind Wang Yusin, and shouted excitedly, "Miss, another person has touched it, and so has Miss Wang's servant girl." Xiao Zaihuan turned her head in surprise and looked at Wang Yusin coldly. She only felt her heart suddenly beat twice, and her neck felt a little uncomfortable. When Miss Wang came in, I went to make tea. When I came back, I saw Miss Wang's servant girl standing beside the incense burner with the lid in her hand. At that time, Miss Wang hadn't sat down yet, so she happened to block your view. The servant girl pointed angrily at the servant girl hiding behind Wang Yusin and said. She had been wondering why Miss Wang hadn't sat down for so long after she came in. When she saw this servant girl lift the lid of her incense burner, she felt that both this servant girl and her master were not well behaved. Now she suddenly realized that it was Miss Wang who had done something, but she wanted to make her a scapegoat. Miss Wang's servant girl touched the incense burner? Xiao Zaihuan said with a gloomy face. She must find out about this matter. If something really happened to Xiao Wanru, she had to explain it clearly if she wanted to get away. I didn't know there was such a thing. It's impossible. Wang Yusin hated her in her heart, but she had to say, could it be that your servant girl made a mistake or is trying to shirk responsibility? Miss Wang, if something really happens to Fifth Sister, you can't get away with it. That day, you had a dispute with Fifth Sister here, and finally parted on bad terms. What do you want to do to Fifth Sister this time? Xiao Zaihuan was not stupid, and it could even be said that she had always been smart. The second branch of Duke Xing's mansion had always been strong, but that was all. The third branch, which could live well under the suppression of Madame of Duke Xing, had never been stupid. They just hid their weaknesses. But now Xiao Zaihuan couldn't hide it anymore. She glanced at the incense burner on the table, took a deep breath, and glanced at everyone present. Not only Miss Wang but also Big Sister, Miss D, and Miss You Can't Get Away With It, and so can I. Do you all know what kind of person Ru and Great Elder Princess is? If something happens to Fifth Sister, I don't know what Ru and Great Elder Princess will do, but I'm afraid that all of us will be in trouble. Xiao Zaihuan suddenly dragged everyone down with her. Everyone would be in trouble, or in other words, not only would they have no hope of being selected, but they would also lose their lives. What does this have to do with us? Besides, Great Elder Princess has to be reasonable. Miss Yu was the first to show her fear and said in panic, Great Elder Princess only has one granddaughter, Fifth Mississippi. If she slashes or stabs your faces to avenge our miss, as long as she doesn't kill you, Empress Dowager won't really blame her. Yu Jia sneered and helped Xiao Zaihuan increase the bargaining chips. What Miss said was right. If third Miss was forced, she would definitely drag everyone down with her. If today's matter couldn't be investigated clearly, no one would be able to leave. In fact, the misses present didn't believe that Great Elder Princess would kill them, but if they were really disfigured or injured, they really couldn't ask Great Elder Princess to take the blame. They could only say that Great Elder Princess was so angry that she accidentally injured them, and then they could get away with it. It was inconvenient for others to come to the palace, but it was entirely possible for R and Great Elder Princess to come over. As long as something happened to Xiao Wanru, R and Great Elder Princess would definitely come over. It was said that R and Great Elder Princess doted on her granddaughter very much and was extremely overbearing and unkind. This time, even Xiao Yanru's face turned pale. She faintly felt that something was wrong. She shouldn't have come today. Although she knew that this matter had nothing to do with her and it was impossible to find out that she was involved in it, she came here today just to watch the fun. Unexpectedly, she got involved in it. Of course, she was not satisfied with the result. Xiao Yinru had always been careful, so how could she let others have something on her? Third sister, this matter really has nothing to do with us. Since it has something to do with Miss Wang's servant girl, send this servant girl to the nanny in charge. It's best if fifth sister is fine, but if there's something wrong, let the nanny in charge investigate this servant girl. We can all testify. Xiao Yinru stood up and said with a serious face. Yu Jie could see clearly that the first miss, who had tried to protect herself before, stood up and spoke because she couldn't sit still anymore. Sure enough, the first miss's words were still as fair as she had expected. Yes, that's it. This servant girl really doesn't look right. She looks very guilty. Miss Wang, don't tell me you've also been deceived. Where did this servant girl come from? The others nodded, and their eyes fell on the servant girl behind Wang Yusen. The servant girl was trembling and looked at Wang Yusen imploringly. Being stared at by so many people, Wang Yusen was really flustered, but she tried to pretend not to be afraid and said, "What are you doing? The fifth miss may be fine now. Why are you panicking first? I brought this servant girl from my mansion. She is very loyal and would never do such a thing." Although she acted as a guarantor for the servant girl, she still felt guilty. However, thinking that it was not a big deal and great elder princess would not kill her for such a thing, she felt a little relieved. She just wanted Xiao Wanru to have a few blisters. There were so many good medicines in the Imperial Palace, which didn't even leave a scar. Was it necessary to be so calculative? Miss Wang, do you admit it? Yu Jie said aggressively. This was not something that a servant girl like her should say, nor would a servant girl interrupt unruly at this time. However, because she was the victim now and had no reverence for this Miss Wang, she blurted out these words. Wang Yusen wanted to scold Yu Jie for being unruly, but Yu Jie's master was not here at this time. Looking at the others present, she knew that they would not help her at this time, and everyone wanted to shirk the responsibility. Feeling angry and resentful, she could only stomp her feet and say angrily, "What nonsense are you talking about? Why don't you take care of your master? How can you still have the mood to make trouble here? Is your master fine?" "Miss Wang, you'd better hope that my master is fine," Yu Jie said coldly and turned to Xiao Zaihuan. "Third miss, the incense burner is yours, so the incense inside should also be yours. Please put away the incense in the incense burner. Otherwise, if you can't explain it clearly, others will only say that it was your fault." Chapter 747. After saying that, Yu Jie turned around and walked out. Xiao Zaihuan, who was behind her, immediately understood and winked at her maid. The maid got up and walked quickly to the incense burner, lifted the lid, and put out the incense inside. Xiao Yinru's face darkened. She looked at Xiao Zaihuan calmly and then at Wang Yusen, with a bad feeling in her heart. "Third Miss Xiao, what do you mean? You really suspect me? How can a maid's words be blamed on me?" Although Wang Yusen was flustered, she did not dare to show it on her face. She shouted angrily and tried to maintain her momentum. She must not show a guilty conscience. Xiao Yinru stood up and said with a cold face, "Miss Wang, no matter whether you did it or not, the incense in the incense burner must be left. If someone wants to use fifth sister's matter to deal with our Duke Xing's mansion, our Duke Xing's mansion will never let it go." She regarded Xiao Wanru's matter as Duke Xing's mansion's matter, and the three sisters of Duke Xing's mansion should be on the same side. Wang Yusen was angry and flustered, but she couldn't say anything at this time. She flicked her sleeves and said, "Well, if fifth Miss Xiao is fine, let's see what you are doing." Xiao Wanru left early, and in fact, there might not be bubbles. She had nothing to be afraid of. Moreover, it was just a few small pimples, which was not a big deal. It might be because Xiao Wanru didn't eat the right food, so it was also possible. Thinking of this, Wang Yusen felt less afraid. She turned around and strode away. She had nothing to be afraid of such a small thing. After Wang Yusin left, the others also dispersed. Yu Jie saw these misses leave through the window, so she went back to report to Xiao Wanru. On the bed in the inner room, Xiao Wanru took off her outer clothes and let her hair down. She leaned against the bed with a high and thick cushion behind her, looking very comfortable. "Miss, they all left," Yu Jie reported. Miss Wang left alone and angrily. The first miss left last. When she walked to the door with the third miss, she comforted the third miss not to worry and should be fine. She also said that if something really happened to you, she would definitely stand on the side of the third miss and you and ask Miss Wang to give an explanation to Duke Xing's mansion. She used Duke Xing's mansion to suppress Wang's mansion and tied the interests of the three people together. No matter what happened to Xiao Wanru, no one would suspect her. Xiao Yanru was really good at scheming. Xiao Yanru slightly raised the corners of her mouth, and there was a hint of sarcasm on her delicate little face. No matter when, Xiao Yanru would try her best to stay out of trouble. It was others who got into trouble, and she would always be the one who would not arouse suspicion. Unfortunately, how could one not wet their shoes if they often walked by the river? Let's wait. There should be news tomorrow. Xiao Wanru said with a smile, "Where is that palace maid?" Of course, there was no news from her side, but the same could not be said for Xiao Zaihuan. Even if they found out early, they would inevitably be hurt. That palace maid said that she would testify, but she said that she didn't want your reward, as long as she could follow you in the future. Yu Jie said. This palace maid was the one who had reported that Wang Yusin might harm Xiao Wanru. She said that she heard a few words between Wang Yusin and the maid, so she reminded Xiao Wanru to be careful. This palace maid was the one who had followed Xiao Yanru in the last life. Xiao Wanru asked Yu Jie to ask this palace maid a few more questions in private, and gave her benefits by both carrot and stick, so that she could testify at an appropriate time. She wanted to please Xiao Yanru, but she didn't want to stand out. She looked quite like Xiao Yanru. No wonder Xiao Yanru brought this palace maid to her side after entering the Imperial Palace in the last life and made her trusted chief palace maid. What did you say? Xiao Wanru asked. I did as you said. I said that you would take her when you had the chance, so she hesitated, Yu Jie said with disdain. At first glance, she could tell that this palace maid wanted to cling to the rich. It would be best if Xiao Wanru could stay in the Imperial Palace, but how could Xiao Wanru stay in the Imperial Palace? I think she just wanted to cling to a new noble in the Imperial Palace. She took a fancy to you and thought that Xiao Wanru might stay in the Imperial Palace, Yu Jie said angrily. Because she was in a hurry just now, she didn't have time to report what had happened to the palace maid. Thinking of it at this time, she became more and more annoyed. The emperor was so old, so Xiao Wanru would not stay in the Imperial Palace. Later, she was willing to testify? Xiao Wanru had expected this, so she said with a faint look in her eyes. I did as you said and used both carrot and stick. After talking to her for a while, she agreed. Yu Jie said proudly. Xiao Wanru had never seen this palace maid before, but she knew her character very well. What she said almost hit the nail on the head every time. The palace maid had been hesitating, but finally agreed. Xiao Wanru was really more and more powerful. She could even predict the person whom she had never seen so accurately. Go to sleep first. We'll talk about it tomorrow, Xiao Wanru said. She slid down, lay down in the quilt, and slowly closed her eyes. In winter, even if Xiao Zaihuan put out the incense tablets, there was still a smell. If there was no ventilation to disperse the smell in the room, the whole room would be shrouded in this smell. The next morning, when Xiao Zaihuan got up, she only felt a dull pain in her head. At first, she thought that it was because she didn't sleep well last night and Xiao Wanru's matter had happened. Even if there was an incense tablet in the end, which made people suspicious, Xiao Zaihuan was still worried. She thought about it at night and went to bed very late. Hearing the sound on the bed, the maid lifted the gauze curtain for her. When she saw Xiao Zaihuan's face, she was so shocked that she took a step back. The water basin in her hand fell to the ground, making a clear, clang sound. Miss. The maid looked at Xiao Zaihuan on the bed, trembling, and her face was pale. What's wrong? Xiao Zaihuan frowned and sobered up. Not only did she feel a dull pain in her head, but she also felt that her face seemed to be covered with something, which made her very uncomfortable. She raised her hand and seemed to want to touch her forehead. Suddenly, she saw 2 small red bumps on her hand and exclaimed in fright. Then she remembered something and said in a shrill voice, "Hurry, hurry up and get the mirror." The maid stepped back in a hurry and almost fell over the basin. She hurriedly turned back to get the mirror. Xiao Zaihuan took it, picked it up and looked at it. When she saw many red bumps of various sizes on her face, she screamed in fright. Xiao Wanru and Xiao Yanru had already gotten up. Hearing Xiao Zaihuan's shrill scream in the middle of the room and then the sound of something being smashed on the ground, the 2 of them rushed in. "Third sister, what happened?" Xiao Yanru walked quickly. When she came in and saw Xiao Zaihuan's appearance, she was so shocked that she couldn't say a word. Then she subconsciously looked behind her. It was Xiao Wanru behind her. Her fair little face was still as white as snow, delicate and charming, without any blemishes. She got up early today. She had expected that something would happen to Xiao Wanru and that she would not be able to calm down for a while. Unexpectedly, Xiao Zaihuan was fine, and the situation seemed to be very serious. "Big sister, what's wrong with third sister?" Xiao Wanru walked behind Xiao Yanru. Seeing Xiao Yanru stop in front of her, she asked politely, Fifth sister, are you okay?" Xiao Yanru couldn't help asking. The one who should be in trouble was not in trouble, but the one who shouldn't be in trouble was in trouble. Even Xiao Yanru panicked at this time. "Big sister, shouldn't you pay attention to third sister at this time? Third sister is the one in trouble. What could happen to me?" Xiao Wanru looked at Xiao Yanru calmly. At this time, Xiao Zaihuan was obviously in trouble, but Xiao Yanru still had the heart to ask her, who was not in a hurry and seemed to be fine, which was a little mysterious. "Big sister, it's fifth sister who should be in trouble, not me, right?" Xiao Zaihuan also reacted very quickly. She looked up at Xiao Yanru with fierce and resentful eyes. Xiao Yanru's appearance was too suspicious. Thinking of Xiao Yanru's usual behavior in the mansion, Xiao Zaihuan almost immediately determined that it had something to do with Xiao Yanru. Third sister, fifth sister left because she felt uncomfortable yesterday. I wanted to go to see her today, but I didn't expect that she was fine. Instead, third sister, Shuqi, go and ask the nanny in charge to come here. Xiao Yanru hurriedly explained, stepping on the water on the ground and taking a few steps forward. Shuqi answered and ran out. Xiao Wanru came in after Xiao Yanru. Seeing the little red spots bulging on Xiao Zaihuan's face, her eyes became colder and colder. If she hadn't been prepared, she would have been in trouble at this time. The air she exhaled was cold, but her body was burning fiercely. These people were really trying to ruin her by every means possible. If she hadn't come back late yesterday, Wang Yusin would have come to her room to talk about the old days. The incense would have lingered in her room for a long time. With the smell of medicine in the protective talisman, she would have been in trouble. Third sister, only on your face. Are there any on your body? Xiao Wanru reminded her. Xiao Zaihuan reached out to pull down the collar of her neck, and immediately found that there were also some on her neck. She panicked and burst into tears. Third sister, don't worry. The nanny in charge will be here soon. Ask the Imperial physician to have a look. I'm sure you'll be fine. Did you eat something yesterday? Why are there all the red spots? Xiao Yanru asked with concern. I didn't eat anything. I ate the same as you yesterday. How could it be? How could it be like this? Xiao Zaihuan cried. Then where did you go yesterday? Some people are allergic to medicinal powder, and some people are allergic to other things. Third sister, are you allergic to something? Xiao Yanru thought for a while and comforted her softly. Third sister, don't worry. The Imperial physician will understand after a while. Don't worry. Big sister, what should I do? What if I can't get better? Xiao Zaihuan choked with sobs. She took Xiao Yanru's hand and was eager to find support from her. Third sister, don't be afraid. It will be fine. It will be fine. Xiao Yanru sat by the bed and let Xiao Zaihuan hold her. She hugged Xiao Zaihuan back and said in an increasingly soft voice, Xiao Wanru's eyes fell on the two sisters who were hugging each other tightly. Her eyes were slightly dim, and a deep smile appeared on her face. Xiao Yanru had calculated everything, but she still made a mistake. Chapter 748. The Imperial physician came quickly. When the nanny in charge came over, she invited an Imperial physician over. There were many beauties living in Chushio Palace. It was easy for accidents to happen in crowded places. In the past, something always happened when the beauties lived here. The Imperial Institute of Medicine specially asked an Imperial physician to be on duty here. When the nanny in charge heard the report, she immediately knew that something had happened and immediately came over with the Imperial physician. It was the miss of Duke Xing's mansion who had an accident, so the nanny in charge was very flustered. The one who couldn't have an accident was the miss of Duke Xing's mansion. When she got into the room, she secretly breathed a sigh of relief when she saw Xiao Yanru and Xiao Wanru standing beside her. Fortunately, they were fine. Otherwise, she would be in serious trouble. Both of them had been taken care of. After the Imperial physician came over to diagnose and treat Xiao Zaihuan, he frowned. Imperial physician, can I get better? Xiao Zaihuan looked at the Imperial physician nervously, for fear that he would say something bad. Well, the Imperial physician looked around and said, "It seems to be an allergy, but if the allergen is not found, I'm afraid you can't get better for a while. Any allergy would be caused by something." When the cause was unknown, it was difficult to prescribe the right medicine, which was also the difficulty for the Imperial physician. So far, he hadn't found anything that could cause an allergy. This room was also very ordinary. How could the beauties who had just lived here for a few days be allergic? The Imperial physician glanced at the people present again and felt that it was more likely that it was a man-made disaster. Of course, he didn't dare to say it casually without evidence. What people in the palace were most afraid of was groundless accusations. In addition to the miss lying on the bed whose appearance could no longer be recognized, there were two other misses present. At the sight of their appearance, the Imperial physician was both amazed and surprised. He was used to seeing beauties of all sizes in the palace, but he had never seen anyone as smart and outstanding as the two misses in front of him. Even if someone wanted to harm someone, it should be these two misses. The one on the bed was probably not as beautiful as these two misses. Could it be a mistake? Imperial physician, what should we do now? The nanny in charge frowned, looked at Xiao Zaihuan's face, and stepped back carefully. Isn't it contagious? Hearing the supervisor nanny's words, everyone stepped back and looked at Xiao Zaihuan in panic. Even the maid who had been standing next to Xiao Zaihuan stepped back nervously. No one wanted to get infected with this seemingly unknown disease. Xiao Wanru's eyes fell on Xiao Yanru. Others were stepping back, but she still stood by the bed with a concerned look and didn't move. Imperial physician, is it contagious? Xiao Zaihuan asked in a trembling voice, with tears in her eyes. She was supposed to be charming, but at this time, she not only didn't look pitiful, but also disgusting. It's best to return to the residence and slowly recuperate with medicine. As for the future, it will depend on how well he recuperates. The Imperial physician shook his head and said, "Have you ever had such a situation before? Have you ever had an allergic reaction?" "No, never." Xiao Zaihuan couldn't hold back her tears when she heard that she was going to be sent back and her future was still unknown. "Third sister, what's the difference between you and others in terms of eating and using? If not, think about other aspects. Is there anything unusual? If there is something wrong, tell the Imperial physician. Maybe the Imperial physician will know." Xiao Wanru reminded her. "Third sister, go back to the mansion first. Father and grandmother will definitely cure you. Don't worry." Xiao Yanru also comforted her with concern. Xiao Zaihuan was going to answer Xiao Wanru's question. After hearing Xiao Yanru's words, she immediately thought of her uncertain future and immediately burst into tears. She had no time to answer Xiao Wanru's words. Xiao Wanru suddenly turned to the Imperial physician and asked, "Imperial physician, will it be bad for my third sister's face if she keeps crying like this?" "Of course not." The Imperial physician nodded. Will it leave a scar on her face? She hasn't taken any medicine, but she still cries like this. Xiao Wanru asked again. Xiao Zaihuan, who was lying on the bed, immediately stopped crying. She stared at the imperial physician nervously, but didn't dare to shed any more tears. Of course it will be affected. Third miss, you'd better not cry, the imperial physician said. Hearing what he said, Xiao Zaihuan didn't dare to cry anymore. She opened her eyes wide and tried her best to stop her tears. Third elder sister, did you notice anything unusual yesterday? We just arrived in the imperial palace and don't know anything. It's also possible that we accidentally bumped into something else and got allergic. Tell the imperial physician. Xiao Wanru urged again. Yes, third miss, can you tell me if there's anything unusual? Without Xiao Zaihuan's crying, the imperial physician heard it clearly and nodded repeatedly. He was at a loss for what to do now. He didn't know why Xiao Zaihuan's face suddenly became like this. If it was an allergy, there must be an allergen. This miss had never had such a situation before. No matter how he looked at it, it didn't seem to happen naturally. I don't know. Xiao Zaihuan was at a loss at this time and couldn't think of anything. She only felt confused. Imperial physician, since third sister doesn't know anything, you don't have to force her anymore. Xiao Yinru stopped him. Big sister, you have to let third sister think about what's wrong. No matter what kind of allergy it is, it can't be allergic for no reason. When I came here yesterday, I also felt uncomfortable, but when I went back, I was fine. It can be seen that if we find out what she is allergic to, third sister will definitely recover. Xiao Wanru said. Yes, the extra aromatherapy tablet. Miss Wang's. Before Xiao Zaihuan could react, her maid had already exclaimed excitedly. What aromatherapy tablet? The nanny in charge asked anxiously with a stern face. It was just that an accidental allergy was completely different from being framed. Yesterday, Miss Wang Yusin came over, and her maid put an aromatherapy tablet in my incense burner. Fifth sister stayed for a while and said she felt uncomfortable, so she went back. After I found out, I took it out. Xiao Zaihuan also remembered this matter at this time and said hurriedly. Last night, she had felt that something was wrong, but it was Xiao Wanru's fault, so she was not very anxious. She didn't expect that it would fall on her today. She stared at the imperial physician eagerly. The imperial physician thought for a moment and said, Is the aromatherapy tablet still here? Yes, go and get it. Xiao Zaihuan hurriedly ordered the maid. The maid brought the aromatherapy tablet over. The imperial physician took it, looked at it, put it to his nose and sniffed it. He frowned tightly. Imperial physician, is there anything wrong? Xiao Zaihuan asked anxiously. Xiao Wanru squinted at Xiao Yenru. Xiao Yenru's face was not very good, but it was normal at the moment. Only Xiao Wanru could see clearly that Xiao Yenru's face was not so nervous before, and she sneered in her heart. Where did this aromatherapy tablet come from? The nanny in charge also saw something wrong and asked. It's from Wang Yusin, the daughter of the left assistant minister. She came to visit me yesterday, and her maid secretly put this aromatherapy tablet in my incense burner. All the misses present at that time can testify. Xiao Zaihuan said angrily and turned to look at Xiao Yinru. Big sister, you were also there at that time and saw it, right? Xiao Wanru had left at that time. Yu Jie, as a maid, could not prove anything. Only Xiao Yinru could prove it. Everyone turned to look at Xiao Yinru. Xiao Yinru lowered her head uneasily and looked a little at a loss. First Miss Xiao, what did you see? Please tell us clearly. The nanny in charge asked with her face darkening. I actually don't know. Third sister's maid said that she saw Miss Wang's maid and said that Miss Wang's maid did it. Xiao Yinru said in embarrassment. His words were very flexible. He didn't say yes or no. Xiao Wanru raised her watery eyes and asked, Big sister, although Miss Wang did not admit that it was her maid who did it, didn't all the misses agree to testify? In this room, only she had been paying attention to Xiao Yenru's subtle changes. Although what happened yesterday happened after she left, Yu Jie saw it clearly and reported it to Xiao Wanru after going back. It was not strange for Xiao Wanru to say so now. Yes, big sister, those misses were all there. They told you that they were willing to testify. Hearing her words, Xiao Zaihuan immediately said. Now she was like a person holding onto driftwood, holding onto Xiao Yanru tightly, as if only Xiao Yanru could prove what she said. Her words were very difficult to answer. Whether she said yes or no, it was easy to offend others and involve herself in it. Xiao Yanru was absolutely unwilling to be involved in it. She really didn't want to answer this question, but everyone else in the room was looking at her, so she had to answer Xiao Zaihuan's words. Xiao Yanru thought for a while and said, "It's better to wait for the other two misses to come together." Her words made sense. The nanny in charge nodded, turned around, and ordered a palace maid standing behind her, "Go and invite the other misses over." The imperial physician picked some common allergy medicine for Xiao Zaihuan and asked her to apply the ointment first. The nanny in charge and the imperial physician retreated to the outer room, while Xiao Yanru and Xiao Wanru stayed. "Yu Jie, ask the imperial physician if it's contagious," Xiao Wanru ordered in a low voice. Yu Jie nodded and walked out. Xiao Yanru, who had been sitting at the head of Xiao Zaihuan's bed with the ointment in her hand, paused, but then looked at Xiao Zaihuan calmly and said, "Third sister, lie down, close your eyes, and be careful. I'll help you apply the ointment." Xiao Zaihuan also heard Xiao Wanru's words. She glanced at Xiao Wanru angrily and closed her eyes. She had a very bad impression of Xiao Wanru. As expected, they were not sisters who grew up together in the mansion and didn't have much sisterly affection for her. Xiao Yanru had mentioned it just now, but now she still asked about it. Xiao Yanru was afraid that she would infect her. She really couldn't like her. No wonder no one in the whole mansion liked her. But why did she have an accident instead of Xiao Wanru? Obviously, "Miss, the imperial physician said that it should be an allergy and not contagious." Yu Jie turned in and whispered to Xiao Wanru. It was very quiet in the room, and everyone heard it clearly. Xiao Zaihuan opened her eyes again and glared at Xiao Wanru angrily. But the next moment, she suddenly turned around and glared at Xiao Yanru. "You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.